Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's week 15, first week of the playoffs. These are your start-sit decisions for every game. We don't have much time to waste, not a single team on bye, and it's also do or die. So accuracy is paramount. Let us begin with our first game of the week. The Falcons are traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. Defense is not going to be very present in this matchup. The only difficult spot we have across the board is the Falcons defense against tight end. That is the only position where they are somewhat vulnerable. Otherwise, they're average against quarterbacks, but at the moment, that 15th rank overall would rank top 6. In the last month, it's been a very good spot. Just ask Sam Darnold with a big bounce back last week. For running backs, it's also league average, but in the moment, the Falcons are actually pretty tough. Maybe this is actually a downgrade for Bucky Irving. If you look at the last month specifically, the Falcons are actually down to the 29th ranked run defense, and that would be ranking bottom 4 in fantasy. So maybe a downgrade for Bucky, but I kind of don't give a shit on the year. I'm more willing to trust the season-long stats than just the last month. I still don't believe the Falcons defense is legit. But versus receivers, that's actually been the best matchup in the last month. So top 11 on the year, elite as of late. So definitely a big upgrade at receiver. And then we mentioned tight end is tough. It has been very difficult this year. But for the Tampa Bay Bucks, it's been an awesome spot for quarterbacks. But last week, Tyler Shuck had a lot of rushing yards. And some of these stats are still skewed by Josh Allen's 6 touchdown game. So the Bucks are a great spot, but will Kirk Cousins take advantage? Not so sure. Last year, though, he did torch them. But running back, that's a neutral spot, so not really going to care about a downgrade for Bijan. And then at receiver, also pretty neutral, so no upgrade or downgrade there. And then versus tight end, in the last month, it is top 7, but on the year, it's neutral. So let's talk about the starts. Obviously, we're putting Bijan Robinson in our lineup. That's a no-brainer. Baker Mayfield, I think, is a must-start. Against the Falcons, I don't think you can bench him, especially given he's getting his receivers back. We have Mike Evans coming off of IR. He's been activated. I'm not sure I would lock him into the lineup, but that's obviously going to help Baker. And then on top of that, we also have Jalen McMillan returning to the lineup as well, another receiver coming off of IR. So with that paired with Egbuka and Godwin and this matchup against the Falcons, I think Baker is a must start. I know he's been in a slump, but I think he's worth a start. I think they will win. I am changing my pick. I am deciding to go with the Buccaneers. Given they're getting healthier at receiver, I think Baker is a must start. But Bucky, even in a bad matchup, I'm not going to care. I think he's locked into the lineup. I think Bucky will play well. I would expect a touchdown on top of that. But Kyle Pitts, I think, is a must start this week. The Buccaneers matchup currently ranks top 7. In the last month, it's a big upgrade, but on the year, it's not bad. And why I'm locking him in is because of the volume. I can absolutely trust the volume to be there because sadly, Drake London has already been ruled out. London is here in the infirmary ward. I am sad to say it. He's not going to be available. I think if this game was Sunday, he'd have a chance, but on Thursday, it's not ideal. And then given their record, they've already been mathematically eliminated. What do they have to play for? So no reason to force him back. He's not ready. And that's a big bummer. I have him in my full PPR league, and I am rather upset not to have London this week. So that is a big bummer. But we've seen Kyle Pitts really play well in the last few weeks with Kirk Cousins. He clearly has the best chemistry, and the volume is great. So the matchup isn't bad enough to fade. I think, relatively speaking, at his position, he is a top 10, at worst, top 12 play. He's been really playing well in the last few weeks. So I would keep starting him. However, Mike Evans doesn't feel like the safest start in his first game back. It's the fantasy playoffs, so you're probably tempted to put him in. He has elite upside. And then the Falcons matchup doesn't scare you. Not just top 11 on the year, but number 1 in the last month. So I want to upgrade him significantly, but honestly, I don't feel like I can confidently rank any single Bucs receiver in the top 10. Evans, I think, is most likely to score a touchdown, so I think I will rank him first. However, Godwin is outperforming Egbuka, and I think I will have him close behind. I think Godwin is playing too well to dismiss, and honestly, Egbuka, I think I'm hitting the full panic button. There is no way I'm ranking him in the top 25. If anything, I would probably rather just bench Egbuka. Maybe you're forced to. The volume is still there. Last couple weeks, he has gotten more targets than Godwin, but he's not catching more than 3 out of 9 in the last couple weeks. He's been terrible, and it's like a full month now where he's really, really mediocre. So with Godwin already emerging ahead of him, I'm losing trust. The volume is really the only saving grace. And then with Evans coming back, I think it's a very big liability. But you can definitely tell me that Igbuka will actually be the best play this week. I could still see the Falcons put too much attention on Godwin, put too much attention on Evans, and Igbuka slips past them. Igbuka, I think, is probably going to be more efficient in his new role. I don't think he was ever designed to be the number one receiver entering the year. He played well, but then he got hurt, and he hasn't quite been the same. I would fade him. I would probably bench him, but there's still a good matchup here and definitely some value in Tampa. It's a tricky spot here, but I think odds are I'm going to have him pretty low ranked in the top 40 at receiver. So good luck with Igbuka, a very risky flex play. And then Algier in this spot, I don't know, is like the safest start imaginable. The Bucs are a good matchup, and I definitely would trust volume, but here in division, I don't know if I'm dying to plug in Algier in the fantasy playoffs. It's very touchdown dependent. Volume isn't high enough, and buyer beware, but definitely just a low-end flex play. At running back, he will probably still crack the top 35, but Kirk Cousins is my long shot versus Tampa Bay. Last year, he torched them. He had awesome numbers, but that was when London was active. I don't know if I buy in as much, but the Bucs matchup is still good. So there's a world where the Falcons do win this game still. I wouldn't bet on it anymore without London. I think you're benching Kirk Cousins, but there's also a world where Tampa Bay's defense finally wakes up. They've been playing so poorly lately. I wouldn't trust them, but I also can see some upside here. In division, there's a chance they step up. So good luck there. That's the last player I would consider in my lineup, though. I'm definitely benching the backup running back, Rachaad White, along with Sean Tucker. I don't like this matchup too much, so only trusting Bucky. And then despite Jalen McMillan returning to the lineup, there's no way I'm ranking him high enough to start. I'm already worried about Igbuka with Evans coming back. Maybe McMillan plays lights out. He could be very healthy and play just as good as last year, but I wouldn't bet on it. Got to see it first. And it's definitely too risky. So no thanks with him. No thanks with Darnell Mooney. Even though he'll be the number one receiver, don't trust him. Can't say I believe in his opportunity this week. He will squander it even if he gets like 8 targets. Would not trust Mooney in my lineup. Not in the fantasy playoffs. No thanks. And then Davis Sills, touchdown or nothing, even with it. Fuck that shit. And then against the Bucs, the Falcons defense is kind of quit lately. I wouldn't trust him. Definitely benching him. And then at tight end, it looks like Cade Otton is not going to play. Otton has not practiced, is listed as doubtful for this week, but I don't care about his backup Payne Durham. With Evans and McMillan returning, not going to start a Buccaneers tight end. And then London, sadly, is unstartable. He has already been ruled out. So tough spot with London, but other than Pitts and Bijan, I'm only trusting the Buccaneers. Maybe Algier, because you're desperate, cracks your lineup, but really it's just a decision on, are you willing to trust Evans, Godwin, or Igbuka in a great matchup, but a very hard target share to predict. Good luck on Thursday. Now we move on to a Sunday matchup between the Chicago Bears hosting Cleveland, and I think after recent production, Harold Fannin is a lock in the lineup. Given his connection with Shador, he's definitely above Njoku, and I don't see another receiver threatening him for targets. So I think given his value at the position, he is definitely going to be ranked as a start for me, probably going to crack my top 8. And last week was so encouraging. Shador's looking good, and I don't hate this matchup, pretty neutral. So Fannin, I think, deserves a lock in the lineup. But when it comes to DeAndre Swift, this Cleveland matchup is not an easy one. However, those are only season-long stats. If we look at the year-long numbers for the Browns versus running backs, they would rank bottom 10. But in the last month, it's been a very good matchup, actually. Just ask Tony Pollard. This matchup in the last 4 weeks would rank top 7. So there is some value here, definitely more of an upgrade than I think you might expect. And for that reason, I think DeAndre Swift as the clear RB1 in this offense is a player I'm starting. But Quinshon Judkins, I'm also going to start. The volume is pretty locked in. His backup running backs are injured. Jerome Ford is on IR, and then Dylan Sampson is questionable at the moment. So Judkins going to get a heavy workload yet again, and hopefully he can convert on those Wildcat 2-point conversions, but still, I think his role in the offense is unquestioned. Stefanski definitely trusts Judkins a bit more near the goal line most of the time. So I would still start Judkins. The matchup isn't great, but it's also not bad. The league average matchup here against Chicago is not one I would fear. So I would start Quinchon Judkins. I think he'll be perfectly fine. However, Colston Loveland, I think I've been sleeping on a little too much. He has been playing very well. That touchdown for Komet a couple weeks ago did kind of fool me, and I'm sorry for ranking Loveland a bit too low last week. So he's stepping up with the injury to Romadunze, DJ Moore playing like shit. I think Loveland is a very safe investment, and at tight end, I think I will rank him as a start this week. Solid matchup. The Browns are bottom 10 on the year, but just like tight end, in the last month they're starting to give up, and it has turned in to a good matchup. In the last month, this ranks top 8 against tight end. So not going to worry about Loveland. I think Loveland is a clear start this week. I think he's a good option with some high upside. However, the Browns matchup against receiver is very tough, bottom 5 on the year. And then it's also bottom 5 against quarterback. So I don't know if I'm dying to invest in them. However, despite Chicago ranking as a pretty neutral, if not above average matchup across the board, I think based on opponent, I would be starting Chicago. I think they're a solid start. No way you're trusting the Browns offense too much. But they did look good last week. That was against Tennessee. Not a spot I really worry about, though, typically. So maybe I would write off that performance from Shedeur. It's hard to believe that the Browns are actually a pretty legit high-scoring offense. So Chicago, I think I will rank top 12. I do think they're more of a low-end starter, but probably a defense I'd be comfortable in my lineup this week. However, Judy played pretty well. Not a lot of volume for Judy, but very efficient, and Shedeur is chucking it deep. So this matchup against Chicago on the year ranks top 3, and that is a big upgrade. I can't say I'm trusting Judy enough to lock him in, but based on the upgrade based off of last week, I do think I'm higher on Judy than I have been in quite some time. I think he's a more legit flex play. He's developing some chemistry with Shedeur, and this matchup indicates there is some upside available. So Judy, not a bad flex play, but still not a legit clear starter. And then Kyle Monangai, I think, is a solid flex play. Obviously, he's behind Swift, so never like a clear start. I had him ranked a bit too high last week. However, touchdowns seem to be kind of his calling card, and he still gets a lot of touches, especially on the goal line. So given the Browns matchup is currently top 7, if he can step up like Tony Pollard, I could see a big game. We have seen him play very well in the past. So Monangai, not going to write him off, but more of a flex play this week. I'm trusting Swift and Loveland a bit more. And then Luther Burden, I think, is the more appealing Bears receiver this week. Definitely not a safe play, not a good matchup here, bottom 5 against Cleveland, but I don't trust DJ Moore at all. And then at the moment, Romadunze still not practicing, not sure if he's coming back. So Burden has been more involved since the bye. Last couple weeks, he is stepping up a little bit more. So I'm more willing to trust him. I think from a floor standpoint, he has the safest value at receiver in Chicago. But Caleb Williams gets a tough matchup here, bottom 5 matchup, and there's a bunch of instances where Caleb just does not play well in fantasy. So I wouldn't write him off. I think he's fine. However, in a 12-team league, I'm probably going to bench him, more of a super flex candidate, and probably going to rank him around quarterback 16 or so. I don't think he's a safe play. In a matchup like this, it's not a good one. So I'm not going to upgrade him as a clear top 10 play. But to pretend like Shedeur Sanders isn't tempting would be a lie. He was the quarterback 1 last week, and no one really saw that coming. So against Chicago in a top 10 matchup, I could understand talking yourself into it. But if you look a bit closer in the last month, Chicago would not rank top 10. They're actually down to number 22. So it is more difficult than you might think. So for that reason, I'm not going to get Q. If you get burned by Shedeur, it wouldn't shock me at all. And last week, I think, is a little too fluky to expect that to produce yet again. So maybe I'm underestimating him, but I'm just not willing to do that. It's not my cup of tea to go with a rookie quarterback on like his 3rd career start in the fantasy playoffs when your season is on the line. So I'm going to pass, but in DFS, I might consider it. And then on the flip side, we got Olamide Zaccheaus, who did score a touchdown last week, but otherwise did nothing. And ultimately, I don't trust really any receiver in this Bears offense this week. If it's not Luther Burden, I'm going to pass, but I could see Zaccheaus still score a touchdown. But when it comes to the Bears offense, I trust them enough. The Browns are coming on the road, and we mentioned the running back position has been playing much better against them. Same with tight end. I think they're starting to quit on the season. Their record definitely indicates they have nothing to play for. So Cleveland, I would not trust this week. Not a good start. Even against Tennessee, I thought they'd be great last week, and they were not. The snow might help them, but I don't think Cleveland is a safe start. I also don't trust DJ Moore at all. Last week, he had negative yardage. Even with Rome Odunze out, he did not play well. So no fucking chance on DJ Moore. That's a very risky proposition. And then Cole Kmet, I still don't trust. He's involved, but not enough, and he's definitely behind Colston Loveland. So need a touchdown, not going to bet on it. And then Dylan Sampson is questionable, but is starting to catch passes a bit more reliably. Definitely the third down running back in this offense and has some chemistry with Shedeur, but not going to start him. And then David Njoku had a touchdown last week, but otherwise nothing. Definitely behind Fannin. I would bench him outright. Also, not a lot to play. He's injured and is questionable right now. And then Cedric Tillman not doing jack shit, so can't trust him. Jerome Ford was placed on IR. And then Rome Odunze, I don't expect to play. He might start practicing, might come back, and it's possible, but after missing last week and having very bad production, obviously injuries are factoring in. So not a safe play whatsoever. In the fantasy playoffs, I would bench him outright. So it's really just the Browns tight end and Judkins who I would trust in Cleveland. Maybe you'll talk yourself into Judy if you're in a tough spot, but otherwise I'm trusting Swift, Loveland, and the Bears defense. Monungai is a solid flex play, but Caleb I'm fading only in super flex, and then Burden, if you're desperate, maybe has some upside as a low-end flex play. Otherwise, don't expect much offense in this matchup. Weather is also a factor. The temperature will be very cold in Chicago, 16 degrees and sunny. At least it's not snowing. However, it's very cold in Chicago on Sunday. So that's it for this game. Let's move on to the next one. We're in Cincinnati. We have a rematch of the Thanksgiving game 2 weeks ago between the Ravens and the Bengals. And when it comes to the Baltimore defense, they have started to step up, but still rank pretty low on the spectrum across the board. Against quarterbacks, we saw Burrow play decently well in his first game back. They settled for a lot of field goals, but I don't think it's a bad matchup enough to bench Burrow. I'm still definitely starting Joe Burrow. So keep him in the lineup. Obviously, Jamar Chase is a lock as well. The Ravens have been a top 10 matchup on the year, but in the last month, they ranked 21st. And Jamar Chase was fine, nothing elite against Baltimore the first time. Not a player worth benching, though. Never out of the lineup. In the fantasy playoffs, you always start your stud. So that's a no-brainer. When it comes to Chase Brown, he's also been playing very well. A lot of touchdowns for him on top of some receiving volume. And then the Ravens matchup is top 12 on the year. So I do trust Chase Brown, not going to bench him at all. And then Derrick Henry had a solid game. This matchup is the best on the year against the running back position. So Cincinnati, definitely a good spot this season. Henry had a solid game the first time, but if you look closer, it's actually not as good. They would rank 19th in the last month. So just like the Ravens defense, they're starting to step up, but not enough for me to fade Derrick Henry. If you have Derrick Henry, I think you have to keep him in the lineup. But last time he did get vultured by Keaton Mitchell, so there's a minor chance he does not get the job done. I doubt he'll get vultured again, though. I wouldn't worry about Keaton Mitchell. But T. Higgins is actually in the concussion protocol, so not a lock to play at the moment. He was limited in practice, and that's a good sign, but it's not a guarantee. He'll be active. So make sure he's healthy, but I can't guarantee it at the moment. If he's active, though, you're not benching T. Higgins. He plays with Joe Burrow, and he's playing lights out. He looked great against the Bills. So got to start him. I would expect a touchdown this week. And then based on the matchup, I think a touchdown will hit for Isaiah Likely. It's 2 straight weeks where he's this close to scoring a touchdown. Against the Bengals a couple weeks ago, I believe he fumbled through the end zone. And then last week, I felt like he had 3 feet down. It was knocked out of his hands kind of simultaneously as the third step, but it was ruled not a touchdown. So he's this close. I think they want to get him the ball, and this Bengals matchup is just so good. They can't stop tight ends whatsoever. So he played better than Andrews the first time. He played better than Andrews last week, and I think he's the better play, definitely higher upside against Cincinnati. Andrews doesn't give you yardage. Likely is very dynamic, I think, in terms of yak he has the potential to be a top 5 tight end this week. I think he's a very legit streaming option. I am telling you, Isaiah Likely is a start this week. But Lamar Jackson is not a player I feel safe with at all. The Bengals matchup is top 2, but his game against them a couple weeks ago was terrible, and their defense is stepping up. Now their season is even more on the line, and I do not believe the Ravens win. The Lamar Jackson saga is not one I trust right now, and I don't think he's healthy. He didn't practice today. He'll probably be active on Sunday. I wouldn't bet against it. However, I just don't like what I'm seeing, and even though he played solid against the Steelers last week, I just don't know what you're going to get. So I would reluctantly start him. I think he's more of a flex play, and in this spot, I think you know exactly what I mean. You would be a bit hard-pressed to just lock in Lamar. You might have to based on who else you drafted and what your situation is, but you can't tell me you feel really confident in starting Lamar at the moment. So good luck with him. I think you have to, but I would rather avoid it, to be honest. And then Zay Flowers actually gets a really tough matchup. If you look at the last month, the Bengals are actually the toughest matchup against the receiver position. They are really clamping down. And on the year, they would rank number 26. It's not like that's a complete fluke. It's a very difficult matchup on the season. So last week I faded Flowers a bit too much. I apologize on telling you to bench him. He actually had a really, really good game. And I'd be interested to bump him up, but to guarantee that he steps up and gives you a great performance, I don't feel like I can say that with a lot of confidence. So not my favorite start this week, but definitely more of a higher end flex option. Probably going to be ranked in my top 30. So odds are you will start him depending on your depth. However, this matchup would indicate it's a downgrade. Mark Andrews, I think, is losing his job to Isaiah Likely, which is odd to say because he just signed a contract extension. But in terms of production, last few games, especially the last 2, have clearly been in favor of Isaiah Likely. So despite the big upgrade, we didn't see him really step up the first time a couple weeks ago. Isaiah Likely was way better than he was. So right now, I don't feel safe with Andrews. I think based on the matchup, based on Likely's skill set, I'd rather go with Isaiah, the likely best option at tight end in this offense. Andrews, I'm worried. If he doesn't score a touchdown, I'm not expecting more than like 30, 40 yards. And that's kind of a liability in the lineup. So good luck with him. I might pass, to be honest. And then Keaton Mitchell scored a touchdown against them last time around. The matchup is the best on the year, but to bet on it consistently is pretty fluky and unreliable. I would probably just bench Keaton Mitchell. The Bengals defense, I will mention, has some upside this week. They've been stepping up a little bit, but they're still a terrible unit, and I'm not going to start him. But you could also tell me that Lamar plays like shit again, and the Bengals offer some value like they did on Thanksgiving. They weren't atrociously bad, but I would definitely bench them. In the fantasy playoffs, not going to start the Bengals. But the Ravens defense against Joe Burrow, I wouldn't trust them either. They didn't play well against Aaron Rodgers. They're kind of giving up, to be honest. I feel like they're ready to check out. I think they're starting to book their Cancun tickets. If they haven't done so already, if they lose this game, I think they will. So I would pass. I don't want to bet against Joe Burrow. And then Rashad Bateman has returned to the lineup, but not enough volume. Definitely benching him. Same with DeAndre Hopkins. At this point, he's a non-factor. And then despite Gesicki having an awesome game last week, this Ravens matchup is bottom 10. And I don't think I'm bold enough to put him in the lineup coming off that game. So I think you're just chasing points. There's definitely value here. If you told me T. Higgins is ruled out with his concussion, then I would probably rank Gesicki around Mark Andrews. I think I'd probably have him in the flex territory, but I don't think he'd be a safe start. And then Yoshivas would also move over, but also not the safest bet, in my opinion. If anything, I would just trust Chase Brown and Jamar Chase a little bit more, but a touchdown for Yoshi would be a lot more likely to bet on. So good luck with him, but until T. Higgins gets ruled out, I would bench him. And then Samaje Perine starting to get a little more involved, but still not safe enough. Definitely benching him in the playoffs. And then Justice Hill is on IR right now. And then if Lamar doesn't play, he didn't practice on Wednesday, then Tyler Huntley has some opportunity, but I wouldn't start him even in a good matchup. I think it's probably too cute in the playoffs. I don't think I would do it. So good luck there, but I would expect Lamar Jackson to play. And odds are you'll probably have Lamar in the lineup, but really just the Bengals, who I'm trusting Derrick Henry and Isaiah Likely, and then odds are Flowers and Lamar still crack your lineup, but I'm not expecting the best outcomes out of them this week. Now let's move on to the Chargers and Chiefs game, and to be honest, I think this game is going to be very heavy on defense. If we look at the Chargers defense, this matchup is really difficult. Against quarterbacks, it's bottom 2. Mahomes has a depleted offensive line, so he looked like shit last week against Houston, and that is the only matchup that is worse than the Chargers on the year for quarterbacks. So definitely a big downgrade for Mahomes, and that's a big downgrade for the entire offense as well. And then against running back, it's the easiest matchup, but still a downgrade, bottom 12. So not a good spot here for Kareem Hunt or any running back. And then against receiver, the Chargers secondary is looking awesome. And I don't think I would trust anyone other than Rashee Rice against them. Against tight end, it has gotten a little bit easier. In the last month, this is the only good spot. It would rank top 10 in terms of points allowed. So maybe Kelsey is the only player that gets a break. But if you look at this track record against the Chargers, there are some instances, especially in Kansas City, as opposed to in LA, where the Chargers defense does limit him a little bit. So I might worry about this matchup for the Chiefs offense entirely. And then when you look at the Chiefs defense, they're starting to struggle to keep their opponents off the field. So I don't think this is a massive downgrade for Herbert, just his injury is the problem. For running backs, it's kind of difficult, but still I'd probably start Hampton. And then against receivers, it is actually looking really good. In the last month, it's not a downgrade anymore. It's tough on the year. But Trent McDuffie is also not a lock to play this week. And in the last month, they have given up the 8th most fantasy points to the position. It would rank as a big upgrade, actually, if you only look at the last month. So their defense starting to fall apart. And then against tight end, it is a tough spot, though. Bottom 6 on the year. So there aren't that many obvious starts in this game, but the clear one that has to be in your lineup is Rashee Rice. There's no way I'm benching Rashee. Despite some drop passes last week, I still think you have to start him. The matchup's terrible, but his production in Kansas City is too high, and his target share is too reliable. I would not bench him. With their season on the line, I think Rashee Rice will still have a solid game. But I don't trust the Chiefs offense this week. I think the Chargers are a very legit start. I am in one league that the Chargers were just dropped for the New Orleans Saints defense. And to be honest, if you watch the Eagles game, I don't understand why you would bet against them. The Chiefs don't look good. They have a depleted O-line. And the Chargers with Jesse Minter are playing lights out. So I think they're a good start this week. I think they're a legit top 10 play. And I would not fade them. After last week, I think they're going to force more turnovers and probably hold the Chiefs to under 20 points. I think it'll be similar to the Eagles game. Not a lot of offense from their opponent. So Chargers, a good start in my opinion. And then Omarion Hampton will be healthier. So I think his volume split with Kamani Vidal will be more heavily in his favor. It was pretty even between the two, but Hampton I think is more valuable and more effective. I would still start Omarion Hampton. A bit touchdown dependent last week, but I expect more touches as he gets healthier. I think Vidal will start to fade. So I'm going to start Hampton, maybe not a top 12 running back, but I think I will rank him top 20. And then Travis Kelce, I don't think is like a lock in the lineup, but this is the only good matchup against the Chiefs. So not top 10 in my opinion. Last week was bad, and I could see it repeat. The Chiefs, I think, are demoralized, and if they don't compete in the first half, I could see them kind of give up in the second, or just the Chargers defense plays so well that they don't get anything going on offense. I'm worried about Kelce, not going to lie. But based on the matchup, I think he's probably still like a high-end flex play. I don't think I'm going to rank him outside of the top 15, but probably not in the top 10. I don't think he'll be elite in this game. However, Ladd, I'm reluctant to really endorse. Someone asked me yesterday on the live stream if they can drop Ladd McConkey, and despite my understanding of the question, I don't think I'm willing to do that. McConkey is still, in my opinion, the most trustworthy receiving target in LA. Obviously, Herbert's hand injury is not helping, but I really think it was the coverage last week why the passing game was so bad for the Chargers. Cooper DeJean was all over Ladd. So maybe it was indicative of what's going to come. He might be dog shit for a while. However, I still think McConkey's going to get the most volume of any Chargers receiver. And then I still think the Chargers are going to win the game. And then on paper, the Chiefs have actually been a top 10 matchup in the last month. So just like Kelsey, it is on paper an easier matchup at the moment, but the target share and then passing in with Herbert is hard to trust right now. So McConkey, just a flex play, not a safe option at all. Similar to Igbuka, I would totally understand benching Ladd McConkey in the fantasy playoffs. Just a lower end flex play, not that safe in my opinion. But Kareem Hunt in a bad matchup, not my favorite play. It's not the worst matchup, but still just like Houston last week, very touchdown dependent. I wouldn't bet on it. And I think the Chargers defense will play well. So I think I'm going to pass. However, Herbert, if not for the rushing stats, would have been awful last week. And maybe don't expect a ton of turnovers. The Chiefs defense isn't playing elite right now, but his passing game usage is definitely down. And given he's only running out of the shotgun for the most part, I don't feel like he's the safest play right now. Last couple games have been bad since the left hand injury. So he is taking some snaps under center, but just not playing up to his full potential. I'd most likely bench him in a one quarterback league. I don't think he's a clear top 10 play at all, but the matchup's much worse for Mahomes. So I would downgrade him even more. That offensive line is depleted. And last week there was nothing to be excited about. He played like dog shit last week. So I think they're going to lose. I think the Chiefs really don't play well here. I would be benching Mahomes in a one quarterback league. I don't think this is the week where I want him in the lineup. So quarterback is in a weird spot this week. Maybe you'll feel compelled to do it because you start your studs in the playoffs typically. But based on this matchup, I would fade him a lot. I don't trust Mahomes at all. But Vidal, my long shot, I think his volume will come down, but has earned legit volume in this offense. I don't think he's going away, but I think I would still only trust Omarion Hampton. If not for a 60-yard reception last week, he would not have been a very effective play. So I know he went over double digits, but still, I think that's going to fade. I would probably bench him. More likely, I'm not going to trust the backup in LA. The matchup is also not that good. So good luck with Vidal, but I could also see him vulture Hampton. Sadly, I don't think Hampton is like an elite play because Vidal is still there, but I'm not willing to start Kimani Vidal. The Chiefs defense could potentially step up. Their season is on the line, and the Chargers in this division matchup haven't played like elite football historically. There's a world where this game is like very low scoring, final score 20-17. So maybe the Chiefs play well, but some injuries have kind of wrecked their defense. And then I also think the Chargers really put the nail in the coffin and limit them a lot. I don't see a lot of turnovers from the Chiefs, so I would definitely bench them. But there's a world where they are valuable. However, given the passing game in LA, I don't trust Keenan or Quentin Johnson. I also don't trust Gadsden. I don't know what the volume is going to be like. Gadsden has a bad matchup, so definitely going to bench him. He's been bad last couple weeks, also in bad matchups. And then Quentin Johnson and Keenan, very hard volume to bet on. Keenan has really fallen off lately, and then Quentin Johnson, if he's not scoring a touchdown, is a liability. So these two, I think you could argue, are droppable if you're trying to make some space. However, they still have elite upside. And if you told me Herbert gets back to full strength and is totally fine, has like 300 yards passing pretty soon, I wouldn't be surprised either. There's still a world where Quentin Johnston and Keenan have very high upside remaining. So good luck there, but I think I would definitely bench them in this matchup this week. But in the last month, it is top 8. Maybe I'm fading them too much, but Xavier Worthy is not safe at all this year. Almost no touchdowns for him as well. Very lackluster, disappointing pickup this year in the draft, not living up to expectations. So got to bench him. Pacheco behind Kareem Hunt, got to bench him too. And then Hollywood in the playoffs, that's asking to lose. Maybe he scored a touchdown, but I wouldn't bet on it. No effing chance. But Trey Harris, not getting enough volume, definitely benching him. And then Brashard Smith is an afterthought at this point. Nowhere near enough touches to trust. So this game I think is actually very hard to bet on. In fantasy, I would rather be fading most options. Unless you have Rashee Rice, the Chargers defense, or Omarion Hampton. I think the only one that's like kind of safe to bet on is Travis Kelce, but even that scares me quite a bit. So good luck in this game. I think odds are I'd rather bench most options. And then in New England, the Patriots are hosting Buffalo. The Patriots are coming off a bye. And this game, I think, could be a massive shootout, a bit of a barn burner, if you ask me. But weather will be a factor in this game. The temperature is going to be 30 degrees, and there's a 30% chance of snow all throughout the game. So both teams are cold weather franchises. I think they're both going to be fine. But if there is one team that has proven they deserve an upgrade and definitely get an advantage in the snow, it would be the Bills. They're on the road, but still they've played much better than their opponent. It seems like all of the good fortune goes in their favor in snowy games. So the Bills defense, I don't really trust at all. However, if they can stop one position, it is the fantasy quarterback. They are giving up bottom 5 numbers to quarterbacks on the season. But last week, Joe Burrow had a great game against them. If you look closer in the last month, it's down to number 18. They're starting to play a little bit worse on defense, and quarterbacks are starting to be okay against them. But I still think I'm going to trust Drake May. I think in this game off the bye, their offense should be pretty good. And then it's really just the matchup stats that would have you concerned. So I don't think I'm going to fade Drake May. And then in the snow, there's no fucking chance. I'm benching Josh Allen. This is a no-brainer. Both quarterbacks, I think, are studs. In this game, I'm expecting a big shootout, and I want both in my lineup. So Allen will run the ball a little extra this week. Clearly the quarterback one, in my opinion. And then Drake May might be forced to finally scramble. If you get some rushing stats out of Drake May, that's really been the only thing missing from him, then I think you would have a clear top 5 quarterback this week. But he's definitely top 10. I'm not going to worry about the Bills matchup. However, James Cook is a lock in the lineup at all times. The matchup for him is terrible, however. It's bottom 2 against New England. So maybe I'm going to fade him in terms of the rankings, but still going to rank him top 10. And that is clearly a must start. No way you're benching James Cook. But I do think Dalton Kincaid is worth a start. When he's active and healthy, he plays really well. And even though Dawson Knox played better than him, last week Kincaid still scored a touchdown against the Bengals. He was a safe play. So in this spot, the Patriots defense is a minor upgrade. Top 13 matchup is fine. So I'm not going to fade Dalton Kincaid enough. In this spot, I think I will start Dalton Kincaid. The upside's pretty high, and I think the Bills want to make a statement. They lost the first game, kind of didn't take their opponent seriously enough, and then this time no one's sleeping on the Patriots. So I'm going to trust Dalton Kincaid. As long as he's healthy, I think he has the upside and value to be a top 10, top 12 tight end at the worst. If you have Kincaid versus Kelsey, I think this week I'd rather go Dalton Kincaid. But Stephon Diggs, I think, is the only must-start receiver for the Patriots. Very consistent usage from him this year. And if you go back to the first Bills game, he was lights out, had well over 100 yards, and I could see that happen yet again. The Bills matchup's not a downgrade at all. It'd be neutral on the year. So Diggs, I'm definitely starting. However, everyone else I think is just a flex play at best. We got Travion Henderson in a phenomenal matchup. The Bills rank as a top 5 spot. So I want to upgrade Travion tremendously. However, he's in a clear time split with Ramondre still. It is kind of 50-50, and it seems like they still favor Ramondre on the goal line. But coming off the bye, that's when teams self-scout, and you can't tell me Mike Vrabel is finally looking at the film and saying that Travion is still worse than Ramondre. So I think the volume might start to favor Travion as we come down the stretch here. Once they get into the real playoff picture, I imagine Travion will be more involved than Ramondre. So hopefully optimistic that off the bye, the rookie does get the bump. And if he does, this matchup is elite. The Bills are giving up top 5 numbers to the running back position. They've given up almost at least one touchdown in every single game. I believe it's 12 out of 14 weeks. There have been a touchdown on the ground against the Buffalo Bills this season. So definitely, I think Travion has elite upside this week, but given the time split, just a flex play. At worst, though, he has been giving you about a 10-point floor last couple weeks as Ramondre has come back to the lineup. So I think he's fine as a flex play, but hoping for the best, and it might not work out. So a bit risky. Can't tell you he's an automatic start. And then Khalil Shakir, the volume is pretty decent, but this offense is so random you can also get burned. Just a flex play at best with Khalil Shakir. But the matchup is neutral, so maybe if Christian Gonzalez locks him up, I'm dead wrong on this, but I think he's fine. He's going to rank around wide receiver 30, 33. Not elite, but probably not going to bench him. He's still the number one receiver for Josh Allen. So that has value. Can't pretend it doesn't. But Ramondre Stevenson could be the correct play in this backfield. The matchup's good enough where he definitely has an upgrade, but I still think I believe in Travion a bit more than Ramondre. So good luck with him. I think I'll probably bench him, but not going to fault you if you do start him. Probably going to crack my top 30 given the upgrade against Buffalo. But Kayshon Boutte, hoping for a touchdown, probably the more reliable wide receiver 2 option in New England. Hoping for the best, but if I was going to start someone other than Diggs that catches passes in New England, it would be Kayshon Boutte. More of a touchdown reliability factoring in with him. But Hunter Henry, always an interesting option. This week, though, I would fade him. The matchup against Buffalo is the toughest you can find. On the year, they've allowed the fewest fantasy points to tight ends overall. However, last week, Mike Gesicki played lights out against them, but that might have just been Joe Burrow dependent rather than Gesicki just playing better than you would expect. So Henry, I'm definitely going to fade. Obviously some upside, but given he's typically someone you're starting at tight end in the long shot category, I'm definitely fading him. I can see it work out, but I also think you will most likely get burned. Against Buffalo, there's not going to be a touchdown available. Most of the time, it's not. So good luck with Henry. I'd probably pass this week, but Keon Coleman starting to play more does factor in a little bit, especially near the goal line. They have targeted him a little bit extra in the last couple games. So he's the long shot, but really just because the Bills are hard to trust other than Shakir, Kincaid, and Cook. And Keon, I think you're still going to bench, more likely than not. But the Patriots defense playing at home in the snow, maybe they step up. Vrabel's defense could play lights out, but I doubt it against Josh Allen. I'm going to pass. And then Demario Douglas still gets like 3 or 4 targets every week, so could score a touchdown possibly, but I'd pass. And then maybe off the bye, the rookie Kyle Williams gets a minor bump, but if you don't get a touchdown, you get nothing from Kyle Williams. So got to fade him, got to bench him. The Bills defense against the Patriots, their defense sucks, so this game's a big shootout. I wouldn't start them at all. And then Dawson Knox last week was more of a fluke than something to trust, so got to bench him. Don't like this matchup enough to start both Kincaid and Knox. If anything, leave Knox on the wire. But Ty Johnson almost had a breakaway touchdown. If he didn't slip and fall, he may have gone untouched into the end zone. However, not going to trust him against the Patriots. The matchup is horseshit. But Mac Hollins could still get a deep touchdown. Interesting dart throw, but I think I would rather go Kyle Williams, to be honest, and that is also really risky, so no fucking chance with Hollins. And then Jackson Hawes scored a touchdown last week, but beyond Kincaid, not going to start. Another tight end in Buffalo. So good luck here. The game has a lot of upside, but it's hard to pin down the secondary weapons in both of these offenses if they're not like clear no-brainers like May or Diggs. Who do you really trust in New England? If not for the matchup, I might not even start Travion or Ramondre. But the Bills are kind of the same situation. Other than the clear and obvious options, it gets pretty tricky beyond Shakir and Kincaid. So good luck on this game, but I think if you can get a piece of it, I think you have very, very high upside. I would like to chase the volume in this matchup. I think there's a lot of points to be available in this game. But now let's move on to the Giants and Commanders game. And holy shit, if you look at the stats from the defenses here, every single position gets a big upgrade except for tight end against the Giants. But the Commanders defense, I think, has kind of quit on the season. They gave up like 30 points, if I'm not mistaken, to the Vikings last week. J.J. McCarthy looked competent. So quarterbacks get a top 6 matchup. That's a big upgrade for Jackson Dart. Running backs also get a big upgrade against the Commanders. So maybe you're going to trust this backfield this week. The receiver position, also an elite matchup here. Top 4 on the season. Down to number 14 in the last month, but still above average. And then tight ends playing elite against the Commanders. Top 2 spot against Washington. So if you have a New York Giant, I think if they're like locked into a lot of volume, I want to start them. I'm expecting the Giants to play very well this week on offense. But even the Commanders on offense probably get a big upgrade. The Giants are a top 3 matchup for quarterbacks, so massive upgrade. And then for running backs, it's number 2, so huge upgrade as well. For receivers, it's top 5. The only one that's kind of tricky is tight end that ranks bottom 12, number 21 on the season. So I think Jackson Dart is a no-brainer. If you have him, you've seen the upside. At times, I've ranked him as a must-start and gotten burned. But unless he gets injured, it's pretty obvious the rushing stats are going to be there, and I see a lot of upside in this game. So very little defense. I think you have to start him based on the matchup, based on his production this year. The floor, I think, is guaranteed for 20-plus points. I want Jackson Dart in the lineup, but his top receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson, gets a top 5 matchup, so got to start him as well. The volume is pretty locked in. And then Theo Johnson is the go-to target in the red zone, and then this Commanders matchup ranks second best against the position. So if someone dropped Theo Johnson during his bye week, you have to pick him up. If he's still available, Theo Johnson, in my opinion, is a must start. I might rank him top 5 at the position this week. The matchup is elite. So got to start him. I want him in the lineup. I'm expecting a touchdown, if not 2. And then Terry McLaurin, I think, has played well enough to start given the top 5 matchup. I don't fear the Giants. And despite expecting Mariota to play, I still think Terry can step up. He played pretty well 2 weeks ago with Mariota as well. And that was against Denver. Against the Giants, he should play lights out. So even last week against the Vikings, he still had somewhat okay yardage. I understand if you think I'm probably putting him too high, but based on the matchup, I think he'll be a top 25, maybe even top 20 play. I trust Terry in this game. So those are the 4 I'm starting, but Mariota, a very high-end flex option, a top 3 matchup for him. So if you're willing to risk it, I think it'll be worth it. And then Chris Rodriguez also, I think, would be a very solid option against the Giants. Such an elite spot. I would trust a touchdown for Chris Rodriguez, but still a timeshare for him, so can't lock him into the lineup. High upside, but more of a floor play in general, and without a touchdown, you will get burned. It's still a big enough committee where I'm not expecting more than like 14 touches. So high upside, but low volume, probably just a flex play, but more likely going to start Rodriguez than not. And then Debo in a great matchup, also a legit flex play, but with Mariota, not the safest bet. Now that Ertz went down, though, I think the volume is a bit safer to bet on with Debo. But I'd rather go Terry. I think Debo is just a flex play at best. And then for the Giants, this backfield, I think, has elite upside this week. However, Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary are in a big time split between the two. But I would probably rather go Tracy. If he gets completely confirmed to be active by Sunday, then I think I might bump him up into the start section. However, at the moment, I can't guarantee that. Last time we saw him, he was carted off the field. But last I checked, he was practicing today, and I think he'll be cleared by the end of the week. So watch out for Tracy. He could be a great start this week, but if for whatever reason, if somehow he's deemed inactive, then Devin Singletary would probably be the much better play. But I think Tracy's going to play, and that's where it's tricky with both. It's just the matchup, why I trust him. But if you don't get a touchdown, you might get burned. Good luck, but I think high-end flex option this week with Tyrone Tracy. The matchup is awesome. So Singletary kind of in the same boat, but given the touch split, more of a lower-end flex play. And then Darius Slayton, I think, has very high upside in this spot against the Commanders. But it is a tougher matchup as of late. It would fall down to number 14. So still an okay matchup, but I could also see the volume just not be there. It may go elsewhere to guys like Wan'Dale and Theo. They might also run the ball a lot this week. So Slayton, probably a good bench stash if you don't want your opponent picking him up and playing him against you. Some high upside, good yardage this week from Slayton, but probably doesn't crack 10 points without a touchdown. However, with Ertz going down, my boy Ben Sinnott, I've been hyping him up for 2 years now, finally gets an opportunity, but to tell me you're actually going to start him would be pretty risky. This is the only difficult matchup against the Giants, so got to see it before I trust it, but there is potential. Sinnott in DFS, I think, could play pretty well. However, Isaiah Hodgins, probably not going to bet on him. I'd rather go Slayton, but has factored in a little bit. The matchup's good, so it's possible, but I kind of felt desperate to find a player to put here, so I don't think I would do it. I think it's a major liability. And then at this point, JCM, Krosky Merritt has definitely not earned your trust, and I only trust Rodriguez. I'm definitely benching JCM despite the big upgrade. But watch him vulture Rodriguez. Right when you think you can trust Rodriguez, watch Bill get back in the end zone and say, nope, shouldn't have bet against me. I am going to make you pay for it. So JCM, very tricky, but definitely not starting him in my lineup. And then the Commanders defense, a big liability. Not a good defense this year. A lot of injuries as well. The veterans, I think, are ready to check out based on their record. Not much to play for. So nothing but offense in this game. Got to bench the Commanders. And then maybe Treylon Burks has another one-handed touchdown grab, but not enough volume. Now that Terry's back, no chance. And then Bellinger gets a great matchup, but I'm only trusting Theo Johnson. But Bellinger has factored in at times. I could see him play spoiler. It'd be very, very frustrating if Bellinger has a good game, though. But the Giants defense, not going to trust them either. Off the bye, there's a chance, but they've been so bad this year. It's an upgrade across the board for their opponents. I think this game is more likely a shootout than not. I'd be benching the Giants. But I would like to bring up one factor here I didn't mention. It is going to snow in this game. There is a 32-degree forecast expected to be snowing. Some light snowfall, but still that does factor in. The wind will be 11 miles per hour. Not a big deal. But maybe the snow does help the Giants defense a little bit. I could see them get some sacks. But odds are, I'm not going to trust him. No effing chance in the playoffs would I go with the Giants. But the matchup isn't that scary at the end of the day. However, Jaden Daniels, I'm not expecting to suit up at all. Last week looked like a mistake to bring him back. And I would totally anticipate Mariota to be the quarterback in Week 15. So got to bench him. Same with Ertz. He's been placed on season-ending IR. That might be his career, given his age and an ACL tear for the second time in a row. I think Ertz is done for. So can't start him, that's for sure, but maybe Ben Sennett will have a good game. That's it for that game. Let's move on to the Vegas Raiders at the Eagles. And I did tell you I believe the Raiders are going to win this game just because I don't have any confidence in the Eagles. But let's not go with that logic. It's fun for me to bet that the Raiders are going to cover and maybe even win outright, but I'm trying to have fun on a separate video that is much different than my logic for fantasy purposes. So in this game, what the Eagles should do is dominate. And because that's what they should do, I'm going to operate like that is what's going to happen in fantasy. I think for whatever reason, they're going to find a way to lose the game. They're not playing well enough. But in fantasy, I don't think it's going to impact my decision-making on this matchup. So just wanted to mention that. You may think I'm contradicting myself given the take I had on Monday, but I still believe the Eagles in fantasy are worth starting. The Raiders defense is not a good one. Against quarterbacks, it's a neutral matchup. Against running backs, it's top 11. Against receivers, it's top 8. Against tight ends, though, it's a bad spot. Maybe Dallas Goedert is a bad play, but otherwise, I'd be trusting everyone. However, against running backs in the last month, it's even better than top 11. It actually ranks number 6. The Raiders defense cannot stop running backs at all. But the Eagles defense is starting to not really play like elite. They looked okay against the Chargers, but other than some turnovers, it didn't feel like they were ever in control of that game. So if not for this matchup, I might be a bit worried about them, but against quarterbacks, it's neutral. Against running backs, it's top 8. So maybe Genty goes off this week. Against receivers, it's also neutral. However, they don't have a receiver you trust, so kind of irrelevant for fantasy. And then against tight ends, it is a bad spot, ranks 29th on the year, but in the last month, they are starting to look neutral. It would actually rank 16th in the last month, so not a bad spot at all if you only focus on the last 4 games. So when it comes to that, Jalen Hurts, I think, is still in your lineup. Against Las Vegas, he should have a bounce back, but maybe he really shits the bed and has another 5 turnovers. I wouldn't bet on it. I would assume Hurts offers good enough value in the playoffs where you should keep starting him. But maybe he cost you a win last week. Maybe you missed the playoffs entirely. But Hurts, I think, still going to be ranked top 10. I don't think I'm benching Jalen Hurts this week. But Bowers, the matchup isn't as difficult as it would suggest. Last month, it's top 16. So a good spot for Bowers, not a downgrade anymore. I'm 100% starting Brock Bowers. I think he goes nuclear in this matchup. If they are going to win, if the Raiders actually pull it out, it's going to be on the back of Brock Bowers. But Saquon Barkley finally had a good game last week, and this Raiders matchup is top 6 in the last month, so definitely a good spot for him. Got to start him, no brainer on him. And then AJ Brown is kind of the main thing that's working consistently for the Eagles offense, so no doubt about it, got to start him. I would expect 100 plus yards and a touchdown probably by the end of the third quarter from him. And then the Eagles defense on paper should be one of the best starts this week. I think you have to start the Eagles if you have them. I have them in the subscriber league, and even though I'm picking the Raiders to win, I'm not going to be benching Philadelphia. If anything, I think the Raiders might win because they like have a pick six, something like that, and that doesn't impact the Eagles in fantasy. So I'm going to start him. It feels like you have to. Against Las Vegas, it'd be pretty shocking if the Eagles defense gave you less than 5 points. So let's keep them in the lineup. They are definitely going to be ranked top 10. However, where I think they could get burned is Ashton Jeanty. If Jeanty goes off, which the matchup indicates he should have very good numbers this week, that's where I think maybe you'll get burned here. But I still think based on this season, even if it was a bad matchup, you would be starting Ashton Jeanty. The volume is too high. With an upgrade, I think he's a much safer play this week in week 15. But Devontae Smith not getting like the safest volume. So even though the matchup is good, I can't say Devontae's like a lock in the top 20 in the ranks. I want to tell you he's like a clear must start, but it's been pretty up and down lately, very hard to trust, and Hurts is not playing well. So I don't think he's like a guaranteed top 25 receiver, just a flex play, not a bad one, but not a clear lock in the lineup either. However, Dallas Goedert played awesome in a bad matchup last week, so maybe you don't care, but if you look at Las Vegas, it's a bottom 3 spot, and every tight end that's faced them last few weeks, I've been telling you to bench, and every single one has worked out. So Goddard, I think, will have one of his low-end games this week. Not expecting the world from him. And I think you can argue he should just be benched. But he's had very high upside. I don't think I'm going to be ranking him outside of the top 15. If anything, he probably still cracks the top 12. But not in the top 10 based on the matchup stats. Definitely a big downgrade for Dallas Goedert. But where I think there's a dark horse candidate that could play well is Jack Betch, the rookie receiver in Las Vegas, because Kenny Pickett is going to get the start. Geno Smith is out for this game. And Kenny Pickett, while I wouldn't expect to play well enough to start, I think is an interesting long shot candidate because for whatever reason, the Eagles are just not really taking their opponents seriously. I think they're just kind of putting themselves in the playoffs automatically, and they want to fast forward to January. They do not give their opponents much credit. So Pickett, I think, has some upside in a revenge game. I could see him step up, but obviously not going to start him. However, I do think Jack Betch has value because last week he caught all 6 of his targets and had, I believe, 50 yards on that production. So Betch has some chemistry with Kenny Pickett. It's pretty obvious, and it kind of makes sense. Pickett was the backup quarterback. Betch has barely gotten on the field as a starter, and when those second stringers practice, that's the chemistry that's being developed between Pickett and Jack Betch. So the Raiders receiving core is up for grabs. Betch was drafted highest among rookies last year, and I do think they want to see what they got in the slot receiver. So since they traded Myers, I think Betch has some value here, and if his chemistry with Pickett does show up again, which I expect it would, I would rather go Betch than Lockett. I think Betch is the more appealing option. In full PPR, I could see him have another 6 for 6 receiving line and offer some decent floor production. If you find the end zone with Betch, that would be awesome. There's a chance he goes over 12 points, but only in DFS would I consider it. No chance I'd put him in the fantasy playoffs. But Lockett, I think, really lowers down the list in terms of value this week. With Betch emerging, no way I'm trusting Lockett. But Trey Tucker also loses value, no chance with him. And then the Raiders defense against the Eagles, I think, has a shot to have like a pick 6 this week and maybe be the reason why they win. However, on paper, you cannot start them. That would be really, really a bad choice in fantasy. Like, even though I picked the Raiders to win, that's really misguided, and I'm trying to have some fun, trying to call an upset that's hard to predict. Odds are it goes as we expect, and the Raiders defense is ass. So gotta bench him. The running back behind Saquon is unstartable, so Bigsby is my preferred option, but can't start him. Same with Shipley, same with Dotson, not getting the volume, very risky with him. And then Geno, I think, gets benched this week due to injury, but it's about time just on performance alone. And then Michael Mayer, I think, will also be out as well. Cannot start Michael Mayer. So this Raiders-Eagles game is kind of straightforward. If you have any Eagle, you're probably starting him, but I am downgrading Goddard the most this week. And Devontae, more of a flex play, but still probably in your lineup. But Bowers and Jeanty are the only Raiders you're trusting in general that's typically a no-brainer. But watch out for Jack Betch. There is a world where in full PPR in like a 16-team league, I could see Jack Betch be a clutch pick up and play off the waiver wire, but only in a super deep full PPR format. That's the only way I would even think about it. In Jacksonville, the Jaguars are hosting the Jets, and this game is a pretty obvious no-brainer. The Jaguars should dominate, and then there are very few Jets that you would ever consider in your lineup in the first place. So let's just run through the defensive matchups here. The Jets defense is a above average spot for quarterback. However, if you look closer than last month, it's actually down to number 26. It's actually stepping up on defense against quarterback, but on the road in Jacksonville, I don't think it matters. I would still trust Trevor Lawrence a decent amount. And then against running back, it's an elite spot, top 3. So definitely trust ETN, maybe even Tootin plays well. But then for receivers, it's slightly below average, bottom 11 spot. So maybe you're worried, but I wouldn't care. And then against tight end, it is the only bottom 10 matchup on paper here. So maybe Brenton Strange doesn't score a touchdown, but otherwise, I think especially the running backs are locks in the lineup. But the Jags defense against quarterbacks is top 10 this year. However, in the middle of the year, they were trying to find their footing. They gave up a lot of points. They've been much better as of late. And if you only look at the last 4 games, they would actually rank bottom 5 in terms of matchups. That Justin Herbert collapse against them really pads these stats and brings them down quite significantly. So the Jags are not a good spot for Tyrod Taylor. You probably weren't trusting him in the first place, but if anyone gets a major downgrade against the Jags, it's Breece Hall, a bottom 3 matchup for him this week. But the receiving matchup is average this year. In the last month, it's down to number 25, so actually kind of difficult. And then although the tight end matchup is top 5 this season, in the last month it would rank 23rd. It's actually starting to get difficult. The Jags defense is actually pretty legit. I did not believe in them for a while, and then now in the last few games, they've really proven that they are somewhat legit. So let's run through the slate here. If you have the Jags defense, you got to start them. I think they were the best pickup off the wire this week, and I have them, I believe, in both of my leagues now, and I plan to start them in both. So Jags defense, got to put him in the lineup against Tyrod and the Jets. No brainer in this home game. But Travis Etienne gets an elite matchup. Last week was awesome, so definitely trusting him, a lock in the lineup. And then Trevor Lawrence has been playing very well lately. The Jets matchup is a good one. I think he's a legit start. Maybe not top 10, but probably going to crack my top 12. He's been a very safe option, and I think because of his connection with Jacoby Myers, he's a much safer, more reliable option in fantasy. I think he's kind of bust-proof at the moment. So Lawrence, I think, is a reliable top 12 play. I wish I started him over Herbert last week. And then Myers, I think, is playing very well. That's 3 straight games for Myers with a touchdown. So his new scenery is really paying off for him. He's playing invigorated. He wants the ball, and he's looking really good when he gets it. So I do think Jacoby is actually a safer play than Brian Thomas Jr. Thomas, I don't think, is fully healthy yet. And for whatever reason, he's just kind of hard to trust. But the matchup's not scary enough to like fully fade him. I still think odds are I'm going to start Brian Thomas alongside Myers, but I think Myers is actually a better play than Brian Thomas. But Breece Hall, odds are you're going to start him. The matchup's terrible, but I still think he'll crack the lineup. Odds are the volume will be there, the receiving work will be there, and I think he'll still give you like 80 plus yards and like 4 plus receptions. I think he will still crack about 10 points. And maybe, just maybe, he scores a touchdown. I wouldn't bet on it, but I think odds are Breece Hall is a low-end starting running back based on volume alone. However, Brenton Strange kind of fell off last week, did score a touchdown. However, it was called back due to penalty. Sadly, Jacoby Myers had a false start. So I was really pissed on Myers for doing that. I had a lot of bets actually saying that Strange would score a touchdown, and I was sad to see that happen from Brenton Strange. But I still think he's a legit flex play, not like a lock in the top 10, but a legit backup tight end. And if you're streaming the position, he's okay. This matchup is not bad enough where I would hate it, but it's also not good. So not going to upgrade him. He'll probably be ranked like 15 or 16 at the position. And then John Mechie, very risky option, but still getting the most volume in the Jets offense. He still had 8 targets last week, and that was more than A.D. Mitchell. So I still think he's the more safer receiver to trust. However, there is a world where Garrett Wilson returns to the lineup this week, and if he does, then you're definitely not trusting John Mechie. But I don't think they're going to force Garrett Wilson back. What do they have to play for? And even if Wilson returns to practice, I don't think he'll be activated in time to play this week. So I am not worried about Garrett Wilson, but there's a chance he does play. And if he doesn't, then I would at least rank John Mechie in the top 50. There's a world where he's a decent flex option this week, but only because of garbage time. I wouldn't expect good production out of John Mechie, just enough volume to maybe pad the numbers, maybe gets a touchdown when the game is out of hand. But a more appealing long shot flex candidate is Baishal Tutin. Definitely has some touchdown production this year, and I could see him vulture ETN in this game. But it's just the matchup, why I'd even consider it. As a backup, I think you got to fade him. Don't think you can start him in the playoffs. But in DFS, definitely some higher upside against the Jets this week. And then Mason Taylor does get a top 5 matchup on paper. Did play very well last week in a good matchup, so there's a world it works out, but I wouldn't trust it. I think it's a little too cute and just very risky. Not my cup of tea. And then Parker Washington, I think he returned to the lineup. I think he was healthy enough to play last week, but a pretty big afterthought. If anything, Tim Patrick was more encouraging, but no way I'm trusting Tim Patrick. A touchdown is pretty hard to bet on with Tim Patrick. But Tyrod Taylor against the Jaguars, not going to trust him. On the year, it's a good spot, but in the last month, it's actually down to bottom 5, and I'd rather bet on those numbers to repeat rather than expect Tyrod to put up top 10 numbers in fantasy. So no thanks with him. The rushing stats might save you, but I still wouldn't expect more than one touchdown, if any touchdowns. And then AD Mitchell did fall behind John Mechie. It looks like 2 weeks ago may have been a bit of a fluke, not willing to trust him after a bit of a fall down last week in that offense. So no thanks there. No thanks with Isaiah Davis ever. The backup is unstartable. However, Garrett Wilson might play. We mentioned it. If he does, you got to start him, but I doubt it happens. And the Jets defense, you're never starting them. That is obvious. Got to bench the Jets defense. So good luck with them. It's really just the Jags offensive pieces I would start. And then I might actually be too high on Breece Hall. He might be more of a flex play now that I really think about it. But he's going to be hovering between like 20 to 24 in the rankings. I doubt I'll fade him enough to fully bench him outright. But not a good matchup. Might be a tough spot for Breece Hall. In Houston, we have the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Texans, and this game is going to be very, very lopsided because one team has the best defense in the NFL, and then the other team has probably the worst defense at the moment, a defense that I believe has given up. So let's just run through the Texans defense, literally the worst spot for quarterbacks, so Brissett, not a safe play at all. Bottom 10 matchup for running backs, so you don't even trust Bam Knight in the first place. And then bottom 5 matchup for wide receivers. Michael Wilson, though, probably matchup proof at this point. And then bottom 5 matchup for tight ends. Same goes for Trey McBride. Probably a bit matchup proof. Probably not going to care enough. But definitely a massive downgrade across the board. I would not trust any opponent against Houston. But the Arizona defense is garbage right now. They can't stop anyone. And against quarterbacks, while on the year, it does rank bottom 12 in terms of matchups. It's mainly because of turnovers. And if you look more closely in the last month, as they've given up, it would rank top 8. It's becoming a very advantageous, good spot for the quarterback position. So an upgrade for CJ Stroud. Against running backs, it's an elite matchup, top 4. So huge upgrade for Woody Marks. And then receivers, a neutral matchup, no downgrade at all. And then against tight end, it is a top 7 matchup, an upgrade for Dalton Schultz. So given the Texans are the best defense in the NFL, in my opinion, they're always a lock in the lineup. This week, they're probably going to be ranked at number 1. At worst, number 3. I think you have to start Houston this week. It feels like a no-brainer. But Nico Collins, not a downgrade for him, so he's been playing well. Even when Stroud didn't score a touchdown 2 weeks ago, Nico had a rushing touchdown. Last week, he went over 100 yards, and I'm not going to bench Nico Collins. But despite the downgrade, a tough spot for both Trey McBride and Michael Wilson. I don't care. The volume is just so locked in for Wilson. And even if he doesn't score a touchdown, I still think he can go over 100 yards because I also expect garbage time to factor in. But maybe that Texans defense is such a nightmare, you're not going to trust him. But if you have Michael Wilson, he's gotten you this far, he's played too well, I think you have to start him. Last week, he gave you like 35 fantasy points. Who the fuck is benching Michael Wilson. Might not rank him top 15 again, but I think you have to put him in your lineup based on the volume and my expectation that garbage time will save you. But Trey McBride, probably not going to score a touchdown this week. I would not bet on it. But at tight end, he's so reliable. He's gotten you this far. You have to keep him in the lineup. I think his 5 reception streak will continue, but if there's ever a defense I'm worried about, it would be Houston to limit him. But can't bench him, just can't do it. I'm worried, but got to keep starting him. And then Woody Marks, I think, is going to be a very, very high-end option. Probably going to crack my top 20 against Arizona. Top 4 matchup, getting elite volume as of late. Last 2 weeks, he's gone well over 20 total touches. I trust Woody Marks, and I would expect a touchdown as well for the rookie running back. But Dalton Schultz has been stepping up in good matchups. I've been telling you, in bad matchups, bench Schultz. In good matchups, start him. And pretty much every single time, it has hit. I don't think I've had a bad call on Schultz, unless I've put him as a flex, and maybe he only gave you like 30, 40 yards once or twice. But Schultz, in general, I've been very accurate on, and I'm just looking at matchups, picking my spots. This is a week where I want to trust him. The Cardinals are a top 7 matchup, so Schultz should get the volume and yardage that was missing against Kansas City last week. It was a tougher matchup, much tougher against the Chiefs. So I'm going to endorse Schultz, a reliable play, more in full PPR, but still very high floor. And then Stroud, I think, has legit streaming value this week. I think he might actually crack my top 12. I'd rather go Stroud than someone like Mahomes or Justin Herbert this week. I think the volume is going to be there. And then the upside is awesome. The Cardinals, in my opinion, have quit on the season. And in the last month, the stats are indicative of that. Like I mentioned, it's a top 8 matchup for CJ Stroud this week. So I'm expecting Nico to play well. If Woody Marks vultures you with like 3 touchdowns, then this won't work out. But I think Stroud will throw for like 250 at least and probably 2 touchdowns. I think he has one of his best games of the year. And I think he would potentially crack 20 points. More likely than not. I think he's a very, very good play. A good super flex option, no doubt about it. Good matchup here. I like Stroud a lot. And because of that, I think Jaden Higgins is a bit safer. But based on the last 2 weeks, I'm not so sure. He's more of a low-end flex play. You got to be a bit desperate to start him. Because even though he's had good production in the last 5 weeks, in the last 2 with Stroud, his target share has been capped at 5 targets per game. With Davis Mills, it was 7, 8 targets, even 9 targets at one point, and I don't think Stroud trusts him as much. So for that reason, he's more of a low-end flex play, but still a decent option. The matchup's not terrible, and I do see a lot of points for Houston, so definitely some upside here. But if he doesn't find the end zone, I think you might get limited to like 8 or fewer points. Higgins might not crack 50 yards based on the volume we've been getting last 2 weeks out of Stroud. So good luck with him, but still pretty interesting. And then Nick Chubb in this matchup does have some upside. We saw Dare Ogunbowale vulture both other running backs last week, and Chubb kind of became an afterthought. But I still kind of feel like Chubb is more valuable than Ogunbowale, and then this matchup is just so good. If you're going to upgrade any backup here, it would be the running back against Arizona. But would I start him? No chance. I might rank him above Bam Knight, though. I really fear Bam Knight's value in this spot. The Cardinals can't run the ball. Bam Knight might get the most volume, but he's doing nothing with it. And if he does not score a touchdown, he is unstartable. I would bench him. But there's a world where he does play better than the rest in terms of the Cardinals playmakers. This matchup is the easiest, but it's still a tough one. I'd bench him, no doubt about it. But Christian Kirk could emerge. It's always possible, but I wouldn't bet on it. Neither would Jalen Noel. They both split work in the slot, and I don't trust either. Arizona, not a good defense at all. They've quit, so no fucking chance. And then against Houston, it's the end of the road for Brissett in the lineup. Last week, I told you to bench him. It wasn't a great call. He was okay, but it's not like he lived up to what he was doing before. I definitely faded him correctly, but this week, outright bench him. No effing chance against Houston, the toughest matchup. Going to see some turnovers, and I'm also worried that Wilson and McBride do not score a touchdown at all. So hoping for garbage time, but might not save you either. Michael Carter also getting some looks, but actually more efficient than Bam Knight. Not getting enough volume, though, to trust. But Greg Dortch, I assume, will be inactive yet again, so got to bench him. And then same with Harrison. If he's active, he's more valuable, but at the moment, I'm not expecting him to play. With his heel injury, I think he'll be out yet again. So that's it for this matchup. I'm really confident in some Texans this week. Even Stroud, I think, has legit starting value, but I don't think, despite the matchup, I'm going to be benching Michael Wilson and Trey McBride. Those guys have gotten me here. The volume has been insane, and I think I have to keep them in the lineup. I don't think I'm going to downgrade them just because it's Houston. I'm worried, but in the playoffs, I think you have to keep rolling them out there. Now we're looking at the Packers at the Broncos, and this game is going to be massive in terms of defense from both teams. When we look at the Packers defensive matchup, it's bottom 10 for quarterbacks, so Bo Nix gets a downgrade. It's also bottom 10 for running backs, so I'm not sure I trust RJ Harvey as much, but there is an asterisk here. If you look at the last month exclusively, the Packers run defense is actually giving up top 14 numbers to the position. It's actually a much more neutral, actually above average matchup as of late. So I still think I'm going to start RJ Harvey. He's been too dynamic and involved to bench. And then against receiver, it's not a great matchup, but not that scary. Number 21 on the year, I still think I'm going to be starting Cortland Sutton, but maybe more as a flex option, not a must start. However, versus tight ends, the Packers have actually been really clamping down lately. It actually would rank bottom 6 down to number 27. In the last month, they've really stopped opposing tight ends quite well. So this is not a week where I'm upgrading Evan Ingram at all. For the Broncos matchup, though, against quarterback, it's bottom 6, but it has gotten easier. In the last month, this matchup would rank number 17. However, some of those games include when Pat Surtain was inactive. So I still think it's a big downgrade. I don't think I want to be chasing the Broncos matchup at quarterback. And then at running back, it's a very tough matchup, bottom 3. So Josh Jacobs would get a downgrade. However, against receiver, it has been easier in the last month, up to number 16. And even when they had Pat Surtain healthy against Terry McLaurin and the Commanders, that offense played well. So they're not as difficult at the moment. They're starting to slip up a little bit in terms of fantasy points allowed. But against tight end, it's actually a great matchup right now. Not just top 10 on the year, but in the last month, it would rank top 3. It's actually been an elite upgrade for opposing tight end. So there is a minor chance that Luke Musgrave is going to have a really good game. I think Musgrave might get the biggest upgrade of anyone in this matchup. However, really, we're just trusting the studs. I have a hard time believing a lot of points are going to be scored here. So at running back, given his production, given his volume, cannot be benching Josh Jacobs, but probably a downgrade for him in the ranks this week. And then same for RJ Harvey. Might not crack the top 10 this time, but I still am not going to bench him. Like I mentioned against Green Bay, it has been a more neutral matchup at the moment. So Harvey might actually outscore Josh Jacobs this week, but I am not going to bench him even if he doesn't. And then I'm also going to start both defenses. The Broncos defense have been a must start all year. So even though the Packers have a good offense, I still think I got to roll them out there. And then same with Green Bay. This is going to be a heavy defensive game. Their defense is playing well, and I think they're going to be an okay start. But I have been burned by Green Bay. They're not forcing as many turnovers as you'd think, and then they don't have like a single defensive touchdown on the season. It's pretty crazy. They do not ever have that elite upside that you want in fantasy at the position. So maybe they're more like low-end starters, but I think they've earned your trust in the matchup. I don't think is scary enough. But then there's also a world where the Packers and Broncos offense plays lights out this week, and we might get screwed. Weather's not a problem. It's going to be 53 degrees and sunny, so no added bonus with the defenses. However, to tell me that Bo Nix is like the best quarterback that will exploit them, I don't fully believe that. And to tell me that Jordan Love will keep rolling against Denver, I also don't know if I fully believe that either. So I think they're both okay starts, but I would understand being a bit worried about it. This game can go either way, either very low scoring or a shootout. I would more likely bet on a more low scoring game. And I also think both defenses get some turnovers. So Green Bay and Denver, I think, are fine in the lineup this week, but probably not top 3 at the position. And then at receiver, I'm worried about Christian Watson. You can't tell me against Pat Surtain you feel guaranteed that Watson will play well, but this matchup is getting easier in the last month, and Surtain is still coming off of that injury, so maybe that is limiting him, but still, I fear him a lot, so I am lowering Watson in the ranks, but still might crack my lineup as a flex play. And then Courtland Sutton, probably a more reliable floor play than Watson, but I don't feel like the upside is like locked in with him. I could easily see it pivot back to Franklin at some point in time. And then also I feel like this is a low scoring game, not many touchdowns available. So Sutton is fine, a higher end flex play, but not like my favorite lock in the lineup. Maybe he's more of a start option though. I might be ranking him a bit too low on this graphic here, but I still think it's a little risky, not gonna lie. And then both quarterbacks I worry about quite a bit. The matchups are tough, especially for Jordan Love against Denver. I would worry about it, and I could see that Toyotathon streak end. I believe Toyotathon is going to be over by the time this game happens, and maybe those Toyotathon stats are over. But Love, I think, is a fine streaming option. Not top 10, but has been playing well enough. You could expect multiple touchdowns, and pretty realistically get that before the game is over. So Love, I think, is still okay, but not my favorite high-end option. Not many yards with Love, just touchdown passes, and I would assume at least one, if not two, interceptions this week out of Jordan Love. But Bo Nix, I think, could also really struggle against the Packers. Not an easy matchup at all. And I also don't feel like his scrambling ability is reliable enough to lock him into the lineup like he was last year. Last year, he was way more efficient on the ground. This year, he just doesn't do it as often. So Nix, a bit scary, a bit untrustworthy. Bad matchup for both quarterbacks. I would fade him. No doubt about it. He's not going to be ranked in the top 10. But Jaden Reed, I'd be reluctant to plug into the lineup. I have him on one of my teams in the subscriber league. And although last week he had 20 rushing yards, 50 total on the game, it was still not enough for me to trust. So maybe Christian Watson gets limited so much they have to look to other guys. There's a world where Jaden Reed plays lights out. He has awesome upside, but against Denver, not the spot I want to be testing my luck. And in the playoffs, I haven't seen Reed healthy enough for long enough to know what I'm going to get. I think you got to bench him, but is a flex play with upside. There's a world where if you're desperate, if you're just chasing upside, Jaden Reed could have the highest ceiling of any player in this game. If you told me he went over 20, I wouldn't be shocked at all. He has that potential, no doubt about it. He's a dynamic athlete. So good luck with him. I could see you get totally burned though. Probably not worth the risk. And then Troy Franklin against Green Bay has started to fade lately, but I still kind of believe like he's still kind of on a similar footing as Sutton. Not the worst play you could find, but not going to feel safe enough to trust him. So good luck with that. I doubt I'm going to do it, but I understand at least considering him. And then Luke Musgrave, like I mentioned, gets the best matchup you can find. The Broncos are giving up top 3 numbers to the tight end position in the last month. So Musgrave hasn't stepped up yet, not enough to trust. But last week he had an impressive deep reception. He's playing a bit better. And in this matchup, there's a world where they completely forget about him. He might go off, but I don't think I can endorse him. If not for the matchup, he would not be on my radar at all. He is very hard to trust. So I'm going to crack my top 20, but probably not my top 15. Very risky play with Musgrave. But in DFS, I like the upside a lot. I hate the matchup, though, for Evan Ingram. The Packers are trending way, way down at the moment against tight ends right now. So Ingram in bad matchups lately has been a very risky play. I told you to bench him last week against the Raiders, and it's all matchup dependent. This week, it's a bad one. Bench Evan Ingram. No doubt I'm keeping him on the waiver wire. But Pat Bryant, not going to trust him in the playoffs, neither with Marvin Mims. That's asking to lose. And then Romeo Doubs, now that Jaden Reed returns, no thanks with him. It's too crowded with Dontavian Wicks still factoring in. Also, Matthew Golden. This offense is too crowded at receiver. Cannot start anyone. Even Christian Watson and Jaden Reed feel like massive liabilities. So this game could go either way. I might be really underestimating some options, but in general, I think most are players you want to bench. And then the backup running backs, definitely not going to trust Emmanuel Wilson or Jaleel McLaughlin. Not enough volume to bet on that. So good luck here. I would much rather watch this game with no fantasy implications. I think it'd be more entertaining. If you are starting players in this game, good luck. I think you're going to need it. The floor, I think, is actually non-existent with just about everyone other than Harvey and Jacobs. But on the flip side, now we enter the game I want every piece of imaginable. If you have any Lion or Ram, I think they have to be in the lineup this week. This game is going to be a massive shootout. The Lions defense is completely depleted. In terms of injuries, they are well down to their third stringers quite often. Even Brian Branch just got ruled out, so the Lions defense is terrible right now. And against quarterbacks is the top 4 matchup, so Stafford already a lock in the lineup, going to play lights out. Against running back, they do limit their opponents, so maybe you don't trust Kyren Williams as much this week, but still, I think I'd bet on the shootout and kind of not care. And then receiver, getting a top 2 matchup, so Puka and Adams already a lock, but even better upside this week. And then tight end does rank bottom 10, but still I kind of don't care. I would still expect a touchdown, at least target, to still probably go in the direction of Colby Parkinson. But the Rams defense is better against quarterback. It's bottom 10, so maybe Goff not as safe this week, but still I see a lot of upside in a high shootout. Against running back, it was a terrible matchup to start the year. A few weeks ago, it ranked dead last. However, in the last month, it has trickled up to number 21. In the last month is actually not as difficult as you might think, but still below average, so still a minor downgrade for Gibbs and Montgomery, but Gibbs is matchup proof, so that's not going to worry me. Against receivers, it's neutral. They have addressed the cornerback position via trade, but still hasn't played well enough to be a downgrade. And then against tight end, it's a minor downgrade, but not enough to scare me away. It's really just because the Lions don't have a tight end at the moment, why I'd worry about that in terms of matchups. So let's run through it. Obviously, you're starting Gibbs. No fucking chance you're benching him. And then Puka, a lock in the lineup, probably the wide receiver 1, if not 2 this week. And then Adams right behind him in the top 5, if not top 6. Got to start Devontae Adams. These are no-brainers at the top level. But even level 2, Amon-Ra, a lock in the lineup, played last week through pain. Got to start him against the Rams with their season on the line. He'll play lights out. Stafford gets a top 4 matchup, so no fucking chance I'm benching Stafford. And then J-Mo going to be needed. Definitely some high scoring potential this week, so expecting a lot of deep targets. The matchup's not bad, so J-Mo probably has the same stat line as last week, if not adds a touchdown to it. And then Goff, I think with the season on the line, should be started. This game is going to be so high scoring. I think the final score is going to be like 40-38, if not both teams sniffing 50 on the scoreboard. So massive shootout. Goff has Amon-Ra healthy. Even his connection with Tesla is starting to pay off. And I think Gibbs will contribute heavily in the passing game as well. So even with no Laporta, Goff I think is a great start this week. The Rams matchup isn't scary enough for me to care. And then while I am worried about Kyren's matchup here, I still think I would start him. The upside in this game is way too high to be flexing or benching Kyren Williams. He still is the RB1, and even though Blake Corum really played well last week, they were dominating their opponent, and a lot of the Blake Corum production came in garbage time as well. So Kyren is still the RB1. The matchup is scary. However, I expect too many points to not project a touchdown for Kyren Williams. So got to start him. I don't think I can bench Kyren if he's gotten me this far. However, Colby Parkinson, I think, is a very legit plug and play at tight end. If you're streaming the position, he has 4 touchdowns in his last 5 games. And even 2 weeks ago when he did not score a touchdown, he still got targeted in the end zone. It just didn't happen against Carolina. That was a weird game. So Parkinson, I think, is very legit, but the volume isn't high enough to rank him top 10. But the touchdown production keeps his ceiling in the top 5. He could be a great start. Not a bad flex option at all. I was hopeful on Terrence Ferguson, but once Higbee went down, Parkinson really stepped up. He is the guy you want at tight end in LA. So very high touchdown production, high shootout, high upside here. Parkinson is legit as a streaming tight end. At least pick him up on the wire if you're worried about your opponent starting him against you. But Blake Corum, I think, is playing lights out right now. I could see it continue. The matchup is bad enough, though, where I'm not going to tell you to start him. I want to rank him in the top 25. He's played so well, and I think he's earned even more looks moving forward. But against the Lions, that's the only position they can actually stop consistently. And I think touchdowns are going to be hard to come by in this game here. So not my favorite endorsement, but in the flex territory that's higher than normal, and Blake Corum's on a heater, I could see him kind of overcome all the adversity and still have great numbers. I think in DFS, I'd be very interested in Corum, but in my playoff matchup, I don't think I'm bold enough to do it. In this Lions game, the matchup's too tough. I think I'm going to bench him. The Lions can stop him. That's for sure. But if you tell me he gets another touchdown, another house call, wouldn't be shocked at all. He's playing very well, and the Rams are blocking for the run scheme very effectively. I like Corum quite a bit, at least as a stash. I think next week he'll be more appealing, but against Detroit, I would fade him. I think I'm going to pass on Corum, but I think he's on equal footing as David Montgomery. I don't trust Montgomery that much either in this game. The matchup is difficult, and if you don't get a touchdown, I think you're getting burned entirely. Montgomery saved you with a touchdown last week, but he only had 6 carries on the game. If not for a house call like 40 yards out, Montgomery would have been dog shit. So not going to trust him. Bad matchup. And despite a shootout potential here, I think the game script will not favor him. They're going to be in catch-up mode, and I don't think they give him enough volume in the run game to trust. So need a touchdown, I wouldn't bet on it. Just like Colby Parkinson, I see kind of equally high value with Montgomery, Corum, and Parkinson. All of them are touchdown dependent, and based on the bar being lower at tight end, I think respective to his position, I'd rather probably start Parkinson at tight end than Montgomery as my RB2. Higher risk level with Montgomery in this matchup. But my long shot is Isaac Tesla. Last week, he nearly had 3 touchdowns. He didn't have a lot of targets. He showed why he's still a rookie, why he's not getting targeted enough, because 2 of those red zone targets should have hit, and he wasn't even ready for the ball. One of them was pretty sad. He was wide open. He ran a perfect route, and then he turned on the wrong shoulder and Goff threw it to the opposite one. So Tesla is like right there. He probably scores a touchdown in this game, but odds are he doesn't go over like 30 yards. And if you're not getting 10 plus points, then odds are I'm not going to start him. But a legit long shot candidate in DFS, I think he's very appealing. I would probably put a wager down this weekend on an Isaac Tesla prop touchdown. I think the payout is going to be too enticing for me to pass, and he gets targeted in the red zone. I see a lot of points here. I think Tesla probably scores a touchdown. But Tutu Atwell, I think, has returned to the practice lineup. I think last week he was available, but did not play. They have not activated him off IR, but he was practicing throughout last week. So he might play in this game, and if he's back in the lineup, then maybe he's the guy instead of Parkinson. But he's also not a lock to even come back to the lineup. He might still be too injured to factor in at all. So just a deep shot, nothing else, and way too risky in fantasy. But in DFS, if he's healthy, maybe I'd consider him. A lot of upside in this game. But the Rams defense, I think, is going to give up well over 30 points, so I think they're worth benching. And then the backup tight ends, Ferguson is not getting involved. Allen is actually more targeted than him, but I wouldn't start either of them. No chance on a backup tight end in LA. But the Lions defense is terrible. They're probably giving up 50, if not 40 plus points this week, and they're a terrible start in fantasy. No fucking chance on Detroit. But Ross Dwelley will probably get the start as Laporta is on IR. Brock Wright has been injured. I'm not starting Ross Dwelley, though. But Khalif Raymond might return to the lineup this week. If he's healthy enough to play, then maybe Isaac Tesla is not going to score that touchdown. But that is it for this game. You're starting all of the studs, and I think this is where the highest upside does lie in fantasy this week. If you have Gibbs, Puka Adams, Amon-Ra, Stafford, J-Mo, Goff, or Kyron, I would assume you're probably going to win your game. You're probably going to have some of the highest producing assets this week. Love the upside, cannot bench any of them. Even Parkinson, Corum, and Montgomery are tempting. Even Tesla, I could argue, has a good game here. However, in the Panthers-Saints game, I have no idea if this game is going to be like a 9-10 battle or another like 30-17 type of game. Last time we saw Carolina hosting the Saints beat them pretty comfortably. The Panthers offense was dog shit. So I think Carolina will bounce back. I think against New Orleans, the Panthers defense is a very safe play. And maybe they're not going to be like top 5 or anything, but I don't think I earned the trust of the Saints offense last week enough to be worried here. Off the bye, off the embarrassing loss a few weeks ago, I think the Panthers will step up. They can control their own destiny. If they win the division, they will make the playoffs, and a game like this is absolutely critical for that to happen. A division win is more valuable than a non-conference or even in-conference non-division win. So Carolina will not get swept here. I think their defense does step up. However, their top corner, J.C. Horn, might not play off the bye. It's not a lock. He comes back fully healthy. So monitor that situation. It's possible I'm wrong, but I don't think a defense is reliant on just one player. In division, they should still be a top 10 play. But Rico Dowdle has gotten you this far. If you made the playoffs with Dowdle, I wouldn't bench him. Against the Saints, it's not a bad matchup at all. Pretty neutral, so gotta endorse Rico Dowdle. I hope Chuba Hubbard doesn't vulture you, though. And then in this matchup, the Saints really shut him down the first time, and it's not like the Panthers' offense is a great one. So I do think the Saints are a legit streaming option. They have a good schedule as well. Down the stretch, New Orleans is pretty valuable. So a decent top 10 play this week. Not terrible, not bad at all. This game, I think, is going to be more low scoring than not. But if we look at the matchup for Devin Neal, this Carolina running back defense is terrible. A top 10 spot on the year, and then in the last 4 weeks, up to top 4, an elite upgrade for Devin Neal. So the volume has been there. Since Kamara's gone down, Devin Neal is getting a lot of volume, very safe floor play, and I do think he's a legit option given the matchup is so good. So if he scores a touchdown, maybe that Panthers endorsement is going to be misguided, but ultimately he's the only one I think gets a big upgrade significantly enough where you should be starting him when you normally otherwise would not. So good luck in Devin Neal. I think the volume will carry you, but I don't know about a touchdown against Carolina. That could still not hit because it's the Saints offense at the end of the day. But Olave, if you have, I think you have to keep him in the lineup. The Panthers defense is tough, but if J.C. Horn doesn't play, then the big downgrade he would avoid. And I think based on volume alone, I would still trust Olave in the lineup. A pretty good floor play every single week. Last week wasn't great, but still I think Olave would be a fine start. If we look closer in this Carolina matchup, in the last month it actually ranks number 15. It's not as difficult as bottom 10 would suggest. So it is getting a bit easier for that reason. I think Olave is worth a decent start. But Tet McMillan, I'm worried about. Trusting him as a lock in the lineup every week is hard to trust because touchdowns are just so random in Carolina. Last time we saw them, Jalen Coker did vulture him. So there's a world where Tet goes off this week, but based on the matchup, it's below average. So I'm not like dying to plug him in. And in general, he's just like a top 30, top 35 receiver, not like a guaranteed top 20 option. So just a flex play I'd probably still start. Based on his bust potential, that's pretty low. I wouldn't expect him to give you less than 8 points. But if he goes over 10, I'd be a bit surprised without a touchdown. And even that is very hard to expect. But Juwan Johnson gets a very good matchup here, so maybe he does step up. The Panthers are allowing top 11 numbers to the position. So based on that, I would endorse Juwan Johnson. He's been a good, solid flex play. And in terms of like PPR value, at tight end, he will be in the top 12. At worst, top 15. He's going to be fine in terms of tight ends this week. The bar is pretty low, though. I doubt you're going over 10, 11 points, even in full PPR. But my long shot and interesting option here this week would be Devon Vele, who did actually outscore Olave, not just last week, but the week before. But he only had 3 or 4 receptions last week for 30 yards, and it wasn't really good enough to move the needle. His matchup was way better last week as well. So against Carolina, I think I'm going to pass. Trusting Tyler Shuck is not my prerogative, but I could also see some high-end production. In terms of volume, it might come back to him where he has 7 receptions. He's had a very high catch percentage last 2 games. But Chuba Hubbard, last time we saw him, did have a great game against the Rams, and maybe he plays well, but I don't think I trust anyone other than Rico. At this point, I don't think it's worth it. In the fantasy playoffs, I think I'm going to be benching Chuba Hubbard. But Bryce Young, I doubt goes nuclear. He's played well at times, but he's been so inconsistent. And if you look at the Saints matchup, in the last month, it's actually the second toughest. It would rank 31st in the last 4 games in terms of points allowed to quarterbacks. So that's where I think the Saints defense is going to be good. I think they'll limit Bryce Young, and that's why I'm going to be benching him outright. Not willing to trust him at all this week. But last time we saw him, Coker played pretty well. Maybe he continues to step up off the bye. He should maybe at least be healthier. But Leggett and him are pretty random, and I don't want either, so no thanks there. The matchup's not terrible for Jatavion Sanders, but in the last month, it actually would rank bottom 3. So actually, it is terrible. On the year, it's not bad, but on the last month, it actually is a terrible spot. So never trusting him in the first place. And then Taysom Hill not getting enough volume, got to bench him. And then Tyler Shuck had 2 rushing touchdowns last week. I wouldn't bet on that to repeat. The Panthers are a tough spot. But Kamara, I'm expecting to remain out. Can't envision him to practice. Don't think he's coming back to the lineup. But if he does, the matchup is great. And maybe Devin Neal wouldn't be safe anymore. But Kamara, I don't think will play. Doubt he even practices at all. So that's it for this game. Going to be an interesting one, but odds are it's more low scoring. But I could see some high-end upside for someone like Devin Neal or the defenses. Good luck if you're going to start them. We still have 4 games left, so let's try and go a little faster now. This Titans-Niners matchup has no defense whatsoever. Literally every single matchup here, other than the Niners against running backs, would rank top 12 at the position. So a big upgrade across the slate. However, if you told me that off the bye, the Niners defense plays much better, I wouldn't be surprised, especially given their opponent. The Titans don't scare you at all. So maybe the Niners aren't going to be giving up a top 11 performance to Cam Ward, but I would upgrade him slightly. If they can stop anyone, it's the running back position, but even that is neutral, so probably not going to care. And then for receiver, you don't trust a single Titan in the first place, so this matchup is kind of wasted. And then for tight end, it is a tough bet, given there's kind of a rotation between the rookie Gunnar Helm and Chigokonkwo. But the Titans defense just gave up insane production to Shadur Sanders last week, and we definitely trust the Kyle Shanahan system. So lights out expectations here for Brock Purdy. Great matchup. Same for Christian McCaffrey. Even B-Rob could play well against the Titans. But I will acknowledge, in the last month is actually a very tough matchup. It was top 3 to start the year. In the last 4 games, the Titans would rank as the 25th toughest run defense in fantasy. Not a good spot at running back, but you have CMC opposite them. No way, I'm going to worry. Receiver gets a top 7 matchup, so Juwan Jennings, an upgrade, maybe even Ricky Pearsall finally wakes up. And then tight end gets a top 12 matchup, and in the last month, it's up to top 6. So 100% endorsement on George Kittle. That's an automatic start, no-brainer. He might be the tight end 1 in this week's set of games. And then Christian McCaffrey, got to start him, no fucking chance. I'm benching CMC. But based on these stats, Brock Purdy going to be a clear top 10 play, might be even top 5 based on this Titans game. And the Niners against Cam Ward and the Titans, got to start him. I know they're kind of depleted on defense, but I don't give a shit. I want this Titans matchup no matter what. The Browns didn't step up last week, but the Browns, their season's over. They kind of quit, and then they just really got torched by Tony Pollard. I don't expect the Niners to let that happen. So San Francisco, a good start this week. Got to put him in. And then Juwan Jennings, I think I will rank as a top 25 receiving option. Definitely a start in this matchup. I like Juwan a lot. If I'm trusting Purdy, the ball's got to go somewhere. It can't all go to Kittle. I think Juwan Jennings will play well. But last week was so good for Tony Pollard. I was tempted to put him as a start. But at the end of the day, I don't trust the Titans. It was the Browns, which have actually been a good matchup as of late. The Niners are below average. And in general, if I'm keeping Pollard at the same level that I previously had him, not a big upgrade here, then I can't tell you he's an automatic start. But last week was really encouraging, finally looked good, and maybe he gets more volume, but I still think it's a timeshare between him and Tyjae Spears. Spears, though, only catches passes, not many rush attempts, so definitely on a tier below. I was wrong to rank Spears ahead of Pollard last week. I thought Tyjae would get more receptions, and he got some usage, but once Pollard started putting up house calls, they just commit to Pollard. That was working. No reason to move off of it. So I understand the usage last week, but it's hard to trust that to repeat. The Titans have been so bad this year. Pollard is very hard to trust, so I think I'll pass most likely, but more of a high-end flex play coming off of last week. But Ricky Pearsall gets a great matchup. He's been ass since returning to the lineup, though. I think he's still banged up. I wouldn't trust him. I would bench him. But if he told me he goes off, it's about time. It is possible this matchup is top 7. But Chimeri DK gets a good matchup as well. He's the only Titans receiver I would ever consider. And without a touchdown, it's not going to be worth it. So not going to start him, but is the long shot going to be ranked in like the top 50 most likely? And then Brian Robinson has some vulture appeal this week. Could get some garbage time usage, but not going to trust him. unless they're trying to limit McCaffrey's workload, B-Rob doesn't get used enough. But Juszczyk sometimes vultures him on the goal line. That's a world where it could happen, but I wouldn't start him at all. Never getting more than like 4 or 5 touches. And then the Titans against the Niners offense, fuck that shit. Titans weren't even a good start against Shedeur Sanders. But Cam Ward, even with an upgrade here, not going to trust him. This offense sucks. And even with 2 touchdowns, he wasn't a great play last week. Barely had like 100 yards passing. Weird game from the Titans last week. But Ayamanor scored a touchdown, but otherwise did nothing, so can't trust him. Can't even trust DK. And then Gunnar Helm I thought was emerging, but last week Okonkwo played better. So I still prefer Gunnar Helm, but neither of them are safe enough to trust. This Niners matchup is good, however, not good enough for me to like die on my sword with the Titans tight end. Last week, if Okonkwo hadn't emerged, I might consider Gunnar Helm a better play. If you actually look closer, the Titans get a top 2 matchup, not top 9. The Niners are giving up the second most fantasy points in the last month to the position. But I don't know where the ball's going to go. I don't trust a touchdown here. I am not going to endorse them in the playoffs. So got to bench Helm and Okonkwo. And then Ayuk isn't even practicing with the team. No effing chance. You're even rostering Brandon Ayuk. So that's it for this game. We got a few left. So let's move on to the Seahawks hosting the Colts. And this is going to be a weird game because of Phillip Rivers. Let's just get it out of the way now. It is really misguided, in my opinion, for them to bring in Phillip Rivers. At 44 years old, what is he really going to do? But as a Charger fan, I also acknowledge he might still be able to chuck it deep. He's not going to move around, but in the pocket, he might get it out fast enough where their offense isn't terrible. But I don't think it's going to work out. I think, if anything, the biggest no-brainer that's not a lock in the lineup already would be Seattle's defense, who, if anything, was already a top 5 play. So against Phillip Rivers, got to start him. You already know JSN is locked in the lineup, so that's a no-brainer. He's the wide receiver 1 most of the time. And then Jonathan Taylor gets a tough matchup here against Seattle, but you're not benching Jonathan Taylor. Let's not pretend like that's even a consideration. Maybe he plays poorly, like the last few weeks haven't been great, but still Taylor is a lock in the lineup. Tyler Warren, I think the matchup's good enough where I'd start him. I think Phillip Rivers can distribute the ball well enough where Tyler Warren is still a safe enough tight end. But the bar is very low at tight end. I'm still lowering the bar. My expectation for Warren is not as high as it used to be, but this matchup is great for him. Top 6 against Seattle. We've seen tight ends perform well week in, week out against the Seahawks. So they have a great secondary, but they kind of forget to stop tight ends. If there's one Colt I'm trusting other than Taylor, it is Tyler Warren. But otherwise, I don't think it's worth it. I have Pittman as a low-end flex option. And because Pittman has played very well, there's a world where he still scores touchdowns. I could see it work out. But against the Seahawks, it's a bottom 3 matchup. No effing chance. I feel good about it. And odds are I'll rank him outside the top 30. And at that point, you're more likely going to bench him than not. A big downgrade because of the quarterback situation. But maybe I'm underestimating Phillip Rivers. Maybe I'm too worried. But the Seahawks matchup is bottom 3. You can't tell me you weren't going to downgrade Pittman already before the quarterback change did happen. So good luck with him. I think it's a bit risky, but maybe you're not as worried as I am. If anything, I think the running backs for the Seahawks are going to play well because I think they're going to own this game. I think they'll be up early and big. And if anything, that just improves the game script for running the ball. I would assume Zach Charbonnet finds the end zone. If you look at this Colts matchup, well, it's bottom 12 on the year, number 20 on the season. It would rank top 10 in the last month. So an upgrade actually for these running backs. But because of the time split, you can't tell me that Walker isn't going to get more volume than Charbonnet. If anything, Walker is a safer play. However, Charbonnet gets all of the goal line looks, and because of that 6-point touchdown, he often outscores Walker. So they're going to be back-to-back again. They're just high in flex options. They're okay, definitely bust-proof this week. I like the matchup quite a bit, and I like the game script a lot. So I think Walker is fine, but Charbonnet is more likely to score a touchdown. I will rank Charbonnet above Kenneth Walker. Sam Darnold had a big resurgence, a nice bounce back last week in a good matchup. And this Colts matchup is not the most difficult. It ranks bottom 12, but still Darnold can definitely play well, given JSN is his top receiving weapon. So if you only get one touchdown out of Darnold this week, I wouldn't be that surprised. They could also win on defense. And I also think Charbonnet and Walker will contribute a lot. But Darnold is often a legit flex option. He has a low floor but high ceiling, high variance, and maybe this week he's not the safest play, but probably does crack the top 18, somewhere between 13 and 18, probably somewhere in that range in my ranks this week. But I haven't finalized them yet, so maybe he'll be ranked lower, but I doubt he's ranked higher. Pittman, I mentioned, is very risky. I think I'll pass. But AJ Barner gets a very good matchup. The Colts would rank as a top 8 spot on the year. In the last month, it's down to 18th, and maybe just like Brenton Strange, he might score a touchdown that gets called back and not give you more than like 5 points without it. So Barner, too risky, but has had good volume this year. If the matchup is indeed top 10, maybe he's a more interesting play, but only in DFS, and same goes with Rivers. There's no chance I'm starting Rivers in my fantasy playoff matchup. No effing way I'd go that far. But in DFS, maybe it's worth it. That offense is good. Those receivers are talented, but I wouldn't expect Rivers to do anything in fantasy without like at least 3 touchdowns. If you're telling me he has 3 touchdowns, maybe he moves the needle. That'd be hard to trust, though. I would avoid it. But Cooper Kupp played decently well last week, but was kind of vultured by Shaheed a little bit. And they're just too fluky. Not going to trust Kupp or Shaheed with Darnold. But Arroyo is behind Barner. Can't trust him. The Colts defense, I don't think they give up. Given their season on the line, they'll at least play well for 1 week, knowing that they have a shot at the playoffs still. But if they lose this game, I would be worried about them down the stretch. And then the Seahawks offense, I worry about. I think they're good. So going to bench the Colts. Don't trust him. Josh Downs with Rivers. Don't know what the chemistry is like, so got to bench him. I hate the matchup. Alec Pierce, also tough matchup. So I'm only going to trust Pittman. I could see one of Pierce or Downs have a great game, but I don't think I know where it's going to go. And Pierce probably is the more enticing option, but watch Rivers not really be able to throw it deep too often and maybe just check it down to Downs out of the slot. So good luck predicting it correctly. I think I'm just going to avoid it altogether. And then DJ Giddens not playing at all behind Taylor, so irrelevant. Torrey Horton is on IR still. Sadly, he's inactive. But that's it for this game. Going to be fun to watch, but I would be worried about all the Colts' weapons with Phillip Rivers. On Sunday night, we have a interesting battle. The Vikings defense is elite. Meanwhile, the Cowboys defense is terrible. So we literally have like diametrically opposed matchup stats here. When it comes to quarterback, the Vikings are the 3rd toughest spot for Dak Prescott. But Dak is still kind of matchup proof. I don't think I'm going to worry about Dak too much. If Dak got me this far, I think I'm going to start him against the Vikings. But against running backs, it's not ideal. Against receivers, it's also terrible. Bottom 2. So maybe you're worried, but ultimately, I don't think I'm going to panic on the Cowboys offense. Not ideal, but at this point, you got to start all of those Cowboys weapons. But for tight end, it's actually a very difficult matchup. On the year, it's number 14, but in the last month, it's number 29. So actually, Jake Ferguson gets a big downgrade as well, but he got some downgrades last few weeks. He's played well despite them. I still think you're starting most Cowboys, but when it comes to the Cowboys matchup, they rank number 1 in terms of fantasy points for quarterbacks, number 1 for receivers as well. At running back, it's getting a bit tougher. It's down to number 7 on the year. In the last month, it ranks number 15. If we go back about 6 weeks, it would also have ranked number 1. So Cowboys, a little bit tougher, but still a big upgrade. And then against tight end, it's neutral. But to trust TJ Hawkinson is a bit rough to do. So really, I'm not going to move my stance on Dallas, despite the big downgrade in terms of matchups. Very tough spot against the Vikings. I don't care enough. The Cowboys offense is good, and then they're very narrow in their distribution. I know where the ball is going to go. So start Dak. Despite the downgrade, I still think he's worth a lineup spot. And then Lamb is just a question of, will his concussion go away? If he clears the protocol, you got to start him. Given he had the concussion on Thursday last week, I think he'll be cleared in time for Sunday night, but got to monitor the practice reps. It's possible he doesn't play, and I would want to be rostering Ryan Flournoy as the handcuff. But at the moment, I think Lamb will suit up. I don't think he'll be inactive. He was limited on Wednesday in practice, but the concussion protocol is not linear. It's not a guarantee. I would not take a risk. I would just pick up Flournoy if available as the handcuff. If Lamb does not play Flournoy is going to have 10 plus targets. I shit you not. Flournoy is legit behind CeeDee Lamb. But assuming Lamb plays, you can't trust Flournoy. We would still start CeeDee Lamb. And then Javonte against the Vikings, I think you have to start. Even in a bad matchup last week, found the end zone. That's pretty typical. The volume is unquestioned. It doesn't share it with anyone. Javonte is a safe play because of the volume. But Ferguson also going to stay in my top 10. He's been kind of matchup proof at times. And even though it's a tough one, on the year it's neutral. Maybe it will revert back to being a good spot. So not going to panic on Ferguson. But to be honest, I'm a bit worried about Pickens' lack of effort last week. I doubt it repeats, but still it was concerning. Definitely a red flag. But given their season's on the line so heavily, I think he will step up. I think he will play better. I think off of the criticism, he does step up, and his matchup also was difficult. He also had some good coverage. Once Lamb went down, he got bracketed and double teamed quite often. So that's where I think Flournoy is really valuable if Lamb is out. Pickens will have so much attention on him that maybe he's not as valuable with Lamb inactive, but I would still start him despite the terrible matchup against the Vikings. But Justin Jefferson gets a big upgrade, but I kind of don't care. Even last week against Washington, he was dog shit. McCarthy had 3 touchdowns, and Jefferson had like 12 yards on the game. Jefferson is not a safe play, even against Dallas. I wouldn't feel great about it, but it's the best matchup on paper. So he's still a flex option, but I don't think he'll be ranked in my top 25. I genuinely still fear Jefferson tremendously. I don't like McCarthy at all, but Addison outperformed him. Also a big upgrade for Addison in terms of matchups. So also in the flex conversation, but very risky. Can't pretend it's not. And then against McCarthy, even though the Cowboys defense is bad, I could see some turnovers. I think with their season on the line, I think with extra rest and prep time, they should play very well. At home, they're usually a better team. So the Cowboys, I think, are an interesting flex option because McCarthy is not a safe play ever. And then Aaron Jones is still getting more volume than Jordan Mason. Despite getting vultured last week, it was a long rushing touchdown. I still think Jones is more involved than Jordan Mason. I'd rather start Aaron Jones than Mason. But I mentioned Flournoy would be an elite start if Lamb doesn't play. Got to roster him as a handcuff at least. And then McCarthy, a great upgrade in terms of matchups here, but I still don't care. I would not start McCarthy. I have no faith. Watch him still throw for under 200 yards, even against Dallas. He is not a good play, in my opinion. So in the fantasy playoffs, it's not my cup of tea. Maybe if it was like 3 weeks ago, I'd be fine with it. But against my opponent, week 15, if you lose, you go home. Not going to put my hands in JJ McCarthy. But Kevontae Turpin, maybe a house call is waiting, but not going to trust him, neither with Tolbert either. Only going to roster Flournoy as a desperation pickup. And then Malik Davis, maybe he scores a touchdown, but wouldn't bet on it. Hawkinson gets a good matchup, actually, but not going to trust him. He got vultured twice by Josh Oliver, so I don't even know what the chemistry with him and McCarthy is. He scored a touchdown, but only had like 2 catches for 12 yards on the game. Mason scored a touchdown, but I don't really trust him behind Aaron Jones. I don't trust both Vikings running backs, and I prefer Aaron Jones. Naylor gets targets, but definitely not going to start him. And then the Vikings defense are a great unit. They really shut down the Commanders last week, but against Dallas, I'm not going to press my luck. I will fade the Vikings. I respect the Cowboys offense more than the Vikings defense. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you should be starting Minnesota and benching all of these Cowboys, but I think I'm going to stick with all of them. Dak especially, I think, will overcome this tough matchup, but I could be wrong. This is a weird game to predict. Not going to lie. Not sure if it's a blowout by the Cowboys or a very low scoring close game because the Vikings defense just steps up. If Lamb doesn't play, maybe it's more low scoring, but if Lamb is active, I would definitely start all my Cowboys. And then finally, the last game, I'm hoping to finish this video under 2 hours. So let's run through it. We have the Dolphins at the Steelers, and the story of this game is to monitor the health of Devon Achane. Achane got banged up last week. Jalen Wright was dominant, had an insane amount of touches, and at the moment, I do not know if Achane will be active or not. So it's too early in the week to know for sure. Monitor the practice reps, but Achane, I don't believe, was practicing on Wednesday, and then because this game is on Monday, we will still have practice all the way through Saturday. We're not going to know until the weekend. So if Achane is active, got to start him. He'd be a lock in the lineup. However, if he's not, I would assume that Jalen Wright becomes a lock in lineup. Maybe not top 5 like Achane would be, but definitely top 20 and maybe even top 12. This Dolphins offense is elite and they want to run the ball and they're playing pretty well. This Steelers matchup is not that scary. They rank 17th on the year, so neutral spot. But in the last month, they actually ranked top 9 against the position. A big upgrade, actually, for Jalen Wright if he gets the job. So there's a world where he's vultured by Ollie Gordon, but still the volume last week was so high, I wouldn't even care if that happened. I would still expect like 20 plus touches. And odds are you get like 80 plus yards as a floor. But odds are you also get a touchdown here. And I think Jalen Wright will be a no-brainer lock in the lineup if Achane is inactive. But that's why there's an asterisk on both players. The health of Achane is critical to monitor. And if he's inactive, I wouldn't be shocked at all. So roster Jalen Wright, I imagine he was the biggest pickup on the waiver wire this week. I got him in the subscriber league, and surprisingly, not too many people bid beyond me. So Jalen Wright, very, very valuable. At the moment, I don't know who the starter is, but if it is Jalen Wright, you got to put him in the lineup. Waddle, I think, has to be in the lineup given his volume this season and his role in the offense. The matchup against Pittsburgh is a good one, top 9 on the year, so I'm willing to trust it enough to endorse Jalen Waddle. But the weather's a problem. There's going to be some snow in this game, 23 degrees, and Tua doesn't play the same. The wind is a non-factor, but Waddle might be limited because Tua plays like shit in the cold. But last week we were worried about the cold. It ended up being about 43 degrees in New Jersey. And if it's 20 degrees lower, maybe it's more of a problem. Tua is 0-7 in sub 40 degree temperature last week. Did not qualify. So Waddle might get the downgrade we've been anticipating, but could also play well against Pittsburgh. Wouldn't shock me either. I think odds are I'm going to start him. The process of trusting Waddle, I think, is worth keeping him in the lineup. But DK Metcalf played great last week. I was really inaccurate on my Metcalf projection. I apologize for telling you to bench DK Metcalf last week, but it was hard to know what you're going to get. That Ravens matchup was tricky, but Metcalf is really up and down this season. If he scores a touchdown, you'll be great. If not, you'll be screwed. But this Dolphins matchup is tough on the year. In the last month, though, it would rank number 13. Not as difficult as you might think. So Metcalf, I think, coming off last week, plays well. I think the Steelers win, and I think Rodgers in primetime will get Metcalf a touchdown. But the Steelers defense, I think, steps up. Given it's in the snow, in the cold, I do believe Tua will shit the bed. I think Tua's going to have some turnovers, and the Steelers defense has played pretty well at home this season. So hoping for some turnovers. I think you'll get them. But honestly, I think in the same game, it's a low scoring one, and the Dolphins defense offers some upside. They've played well at times, and in terms of matchups, they're not the scariest, but they're also somewhat legit. They have not given up either. So Miami, interesting in terms of flex options, but I think the cold will not help them. So also their defense, I think, is limited a little bit. If they're not winning early in this game, I think they might want to get it over with and check out a little early if they're too cold. So Dolphins, not as safe as you might think, but still kind of interesting. That game should be a low score. However, Jaylen Warren gets a very difficult matchup on paper. The Dolphins on the year would rank number 18 in terms of points allowed to running backs. However, in the last month, they ranked number 31. They are really clamping down, really playing lights out against opposing running backs. So Jaylen Warren is not as safe, not a big upgrade for Warren. But last week, the only thing that really worked other than DK Metcalf in this offense and also on the year is the run game. So the volume will be there. Warren, I think, will be fine, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he doesn't score a touchdown. If he gets vultured by Gainwell, it could happen again. And I think both of them are just flex plays. But Gainwell is hard to trust. Gainwell is definitely a tier below of Jaylen Warren, but sometimes they're pretty equal, and it wouldn't shock me if this week just looks like last week again, and both running backs do score a touchdown. So good luck there, but I think I prefer Warren considerably over Kenny Gainwell. And then because of this matchup against the tight end position, it's a great spot for the Steelers tight ends against Miami, but they have 3, so it's a bit hard to trust. It's also a great spot for tight end against Pittsburgh. So that's why Darren Waller is my long shot here, but last couple weeks he's actually not scored a touchdown, and he's also been factoring in alongside of Greg Dulcich. So because Dulcich hasn't gone away, I don't think either tight end is safe. I'm definitely benching Dulcich, but Waller could still score a touchdown. This matchup is good, and that's why he's an interesting long shot, but I've lost faith. I don't think he's worth a start. Too risky in the fantasy playoffs. But last week we saw Rodgers looked really good. I could see it happen again. This Dolphins matchup is top 12 on the season. So if the snow isn't going to limit one of these quarterbacks, it would be Rodgers. There's a world that works out, but I still think it's a low scoring game, and they probably lean on the run again. So Rodgers, I think I'll pass on, but last week was very encouraging. He has had good games at times, but a little too touchdown dependent, in my opinion. Tua, no chance. Against the Steelers, it's a good matchup, but in the snow this week, it's much colder than it was in New Jersey last week, and I think this is where I'm not going to press my luck. In the fantasy playoffs, not going to start Tua in the snow. Ollie Gordon might have some vulture potential if Achane doesn't play, but I'm only going to trust Jalen Wright, but Gordon could be annoying. And then Malik Washington, now that Waller's back, has been pretty irrelevant, so not going to trust him. And then Jonnu gets a revenge game, so maybe he scores a touchdown, but Darnell Washington has been more involved. Freiermuth has kind of fallen off. I'm not starting either Steelers tight end, but the matchup is great against Miami. There's a value for one of them, and if I had to pick one, I think I'd give the touchdown to Jonnu because of the revenge narrative. But not going to start him, not expecting enough volume or yards to pay off. Not going to go over 10 points, more likely, even with a touchdown. But Calvin Austin, not going to trust him. A deep shot, but in general, it doesn't hit. And then Dulcich, I mentioned, is relevant, but not worth trusting at all. So that's it for this video. Those are all my start sits for the Dolphins and Steelers, and I am saying goodbye. That's going to be it. This video's now over 2 hours. So if you want more content, subscribe and hit the like button. If you made it this far, definitely hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. But I'll see y'all tomorrow with some rankings and the live stream for the start sit video of the Falcons at the Bucks. And I am going to switch my pick. I do think the Buccaneers will win now that I know that London will not play. But that's it for me. I'm Adam Riancho, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.